Welcome to the live stream for October 18th, 2017. My name is Dana Morningstar, and we do these live streams every Wednesday night if you are new here. They run for about 3 hours, and they start at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So welcome. I got some people hopping on. Elizabeth, Samuel, Antonia, Kenneth, Crypto Bishop, Codependent Warrior. Hi, hello. So I told you guys I was going to try to do the sensory deprivation tank thing before this live stream, and I did it. I did it this morning, and it was really pretty cool. I freaked myself out pretty bad a few times, like no lie. So it was very interesting. I took some pictures. I need to make it into like a whole video, but let me see if you can see on my phone for now. But like, it was like this blue, like blue lit clamshell. That's basically what it was. It was really interesting. It was for an hour, and they're big. They're like 7 feet long and about 5 feet wide. And there's I think they said close to 1,500 pounds of Epsom salt in there. So you float effortlessly, like just a cork floating on the water. I mean, you don't even have to try to float, you just float. And the room is pitch black. The tank itself had a light, that blue light in it. So if you did get freaked out, like I did, you can turn that light on. But it took me a while, and I guess this is pretty common. It took me about 45 minutes. So like most of the time I was in there to actually start to relax. And I didn't expect that. And there's only about maybe a foot of water in the tank, like 12 to 15 inches or so of water in the tank. Anyways, so it's kind of like floating in a giant bathtub. But when all the lights are off, it's really, it's really, really, really dark in there. You can't see your hand in front of your face. And that part was kind of cool for as long as they could handle it. I kept seeing what looked like electrical impulses, like moving in front of my face. And that was pretty cool to just kind of watch that and try to figure out, what is this? Is this like my eyes trying to adjust to the darkness, or it was just very, very different, very, very interesting. One thing I really did notice in the tank though was, so like you can do, float in different positions, like kind of whatever's comfortable. And so for a long time I was floating with my arms out like this, and my arms kept going numb, and then my hands would go numb. And I realized that was from just all of the tension in my neck and in my shoulders. So I knew that I was storing a lot of tension there. I didn't realize how much tension until I was in that tank. And then I was like, man, this is not a good thing. And trying to relax in there, the main part of me that had a problem relaxing was my neck and my shoulders. So that was, I gained a lot of like body awareness, I guess, and forcing myself to basically do nothing for an hour is a big thing for me, because I'm always doing something. I'm always thinking about something. And that's another thing. So when you're in there, it's, it's so dark and you've got nothing to do, and it's so quiet that you hear your heartbeat. And that's really cool. But yeah, like at one point I was laying in there and I just kept thinking of the TV show Stranger Things, and was, and then it was like my brain would just go to that place. I'm like, what if the Demigorgon shows up? And then I'm like, Dana, stop. You are 40 years old. Like, seriously, stop. And then I'm like, no, but what if it did? And I totally freaking myself out to the point where I had to turn the light on, and was kind of in a panic to to find it. So it's ridiculous. But the name of the tank, I don't remember if I ever saw that the tank itself had a name. I'd have to find out. So, I don't know. But the people are talking about the Demigorgon. Yeah, yeah, it's freaky. Freaky, freaky. Samuel asks, "Is that painting behind her a butterfly?" Yes. Yes, it is. That's what it's supposed to be. I painted that with my fingers. I got frustrated with the paintbrush, and so that's why it looks the way that it does. Got lots of people hopping on. Brandy, Lauren, Jessica, Carolyn, Missouri Cowboy. Howdy, howdy. Sabrina asks, "Hello, Dana. Are you still publishing a book?" Well, yes. Yes, I am. In theory, it's amazing. Everything takes so much longer than you think it's going to take. So mm, this first book has really just been every book I've written a few now. Uh is its own set of challenges and its own set of frustrations and like issues and concerns and high points and low points and aha moments and the whole thing. It really, really is. The first book has been a wild roller coaster, and it's still at the guy who's formatting it. He still has it, and I haven't heard from him. That book is pretty extensive. So the table of contents, I know, like that's the issue. That's why it's taken so long. I'm really hoping that it will be published by next live stream. I really didn't I thought he'd have it back to me by now, but my goal is as soon as he gets it back to me, it's going up. And like it just needs to be done. The hardest part, and I think I was talking about this a little bit last time, is the hardest part I found with doing anything creative is that whether it's a painting or I think especially with anything that takes a lot of time. Like this didn't take me that long, but this book has taken hundreds upon hundreds of hours. And I kept thinking, I'm like, man, I'd really like what I wrote. And then when that did happen, there are many times where I didn't like what I wrote, or I would just hit a writer's block and it was like pushing a boulder up a hill. It was awful. But when I did like what I had written, then I would find myself like going back to it maybe a month later and you're trying to kind of reread through it for consistency and flow and grammar and all that stuff. And I would see everything else I needed to add. And it was really kind of crazy making. So I'm like, man, this really needs a lot of work. But what I've realized is when you're creating something that's that big and that time intensive, by the time you get to the beginning of it again, like I had changed so much and the way that I had my understanding of all of this and my message and all of that had changed so much. So it was like a different book. So I don't know. It was kind of like trying to hit a moving target every single time. So that's been a big challenge with it. But yeah, so long story short, hopefully next week. uh Oh, good. Carolyn says, "Dana, I just want to say thank you so much. Your videos were what prompted me to begin the ending of a very abusive relationship." Good for you. And thank you. Thank you for that. I'm so thrilled that my videos have had such a positive impact on you and gave you the clarity and the validation that you were seeking in order to to end it. So I know it's never easy. Ending a relationship, no matter how awful or hurtful, is it's still difficult. So I'm glad. I'm glad that you're able to do that and you're moving forward. Samuel asks, "Is it bad to confront a covert narcissist about her behavior? I'm kind of scared, but I want to call her out." The challenge with that is generally when you call out any abusive person, especially if they don't see a problem with their behavior. So there's the abusive people out there that know exactly what they're doing, and they're doing it intentionally, and they're very kind of methodical and sadistic. And then there's a lot of abusive people out there that are just kind of so blinded by their selfishness and entitlement that they know, I mean, they know what they're doing, they know what they're saying, but it's like they lack empathy. They lack that emotional connection, so they don't understand because they're not feeling hurt, that they don't understand why you would feel hurt. And it's so strange and interesting to kind of watch that unfold, because if you were to do the same thing to her or to an abusive person like that, like, they can dish it, but they can't take it. So if you were to give them a dose of their own medicine, they would become really hurt and really offended and like, you're so abusive, you're so mean. But it's like they don't get that that's what they're doing too. And the more you call them out on it, oftentimes the more they'll just say, "You're crazy, you're nuts, you're too sensitive," what have you. If you're talking about a female abuser, I think one of the added challenges that men have is that all abusive people kind of grab whatever they have and use it against their target. So if she's been covertly abusive to you, if you were to say, "Hey, you know what? You're a narcissist, you're abusive, like this is ridiculous, blah, blah, blah." She's going to also go at you and say, like, oh, she's going to make it your fault and probably try to emasculate you in the process. You're too sensitive. You're too emotional. You're such a sissy, blah, 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 grinding you down. It's to totally invalidate you. So I'd prepare yourself emotionally for that. And most narcissists, if you call them a narcissist, they either think that that word means something. They often confuse that with like self-love, or that thinking that they're so powerful, especially nowadays. There's so much garbage out there on YouTube and out in the media, narcissists are, so magnetic and powerful, and they're not. Like, they can cause a lot of damage and destruction, but they're really deep down, like, they're pathetic creatures that go around destroying people. Like, to me, there's nothing powerful in that. It's sort of like the saying goes, rudeness is the weak person's version of strength. And with narcissists, especially with like verbally and emotionally and psychologically abusive ones, that's what that is. But it doesn't make it hurt any less, but to me, it's just pathetic, pathetic on their part. So I guess the point being, it's up to you on how you handle it, but and also keep in mind that they can be very vindictive. So, and most narcissists will spin things around to where they're the victim. Like, oh, you called her out on stuff, then she might be like, I can't believe he did this. And then sometimes you're better off just not kicking that bee's nest, and you're better off just distancing yourself as much as possible. Sam says, what's weird, Samuel says, what's weird too is that I found a mutual friend with a narc on one of your YouTube videos. It's trippy. That is small world. Small world sometimes. Yeah, Samuel says, yeah, I'm gonna keep my mouth shut. It's not worth it. If you're familiar too with the term flying monkey, that's another big thing to watch out for. So, and it's something that a lot of people, like normal, decent people, kind of don't even think this way. So we're not even prepared for it. But oftentimes, if you attack the narcissist and out her in some sort of way and say, like, yeah, this is what she's doing, she's so manipulative, she's so abusive, because they often feel like they're the victim. Or if they're sadistic, and they just want to try to like dismantle and destroy their target, then they'll create what's called a flying monkey. And then that, of course, that term comes from the Wizard of Oz. So it's where the narcissist, like the Wicked Witch, gets minions, like the people in her inner circle or his inner circle. They basically manipulate them. They tell them this very skewed version of events, of course, leaving out everything bad that they did, but just focusing on everything that you did and then spinning it around, or just completely making stuff up. That's very true too. And then they all go on the attack. And then it's really difficult because you just don't know how far like where all these other manipulated people are and or who they are, because that could be like her cousin, her neighbor, her mother, her friend, her brother, like her brother's friends, these kinds of things. And then that's really hard when you're just dealing with that kind of backlash to all of this. It's awful. Carolyn says, it's been 1.5 years since I kicked him out of my life. He lives on and continues to stalk me. On Facebook, he has photos of my house, my dog, my hometown, you name it. Do I just ignore it? Yeah, I would. Because there's not a lot of control you have over it. Even if you were to try to report that stuff to Facebook, if he knows that he's getting to you, then he'll amp it up, is would be my guess. That's kind of what they tend to do. So I would block him. I would just never look at his stuff again and try to just drive on. And you might even want to create a fake Facebook account. A lot of people will use like their first name and their middle name, or their first name and then like a made up last name for privacy, kind of for that reason, because it can be really difficult to move on when you have this abusive person in your life, especially if they're stalking you on Facebook like that. But one thing to consider too is if you do go and create a fake account, is to realize that if you start befriending all of the same people, then if they're, really pathetic, then they're going to start figuring out, okay, well, I know her mother's name and I know her mother maybe only has 23 Facebook friends, and then they're going to start going through them if they've got nothing better to do. And then they can kind of reverse engineer it and figure out which fake account is yours. So just something to consider. Another alternative might be, if you're even kind of thinking this, is just doing a totally different name and putting up fake pictures. But all of that can just get so exhausting. So, yeah, I'm sorry that you're going through that. Standing Firm says, yeah, I agree with Missouri Cowboy, Gray Rock. Don't confront. Ross Rosenberg says that if you unmask a narcissist, run and quietly. I agree. To me, it's a lot like thinking about, you know, it's like having a giant bee's nest in the corner of your house. you know it's a problem, and it's a problem, and you know that it needs to come down, but it's a really good idea to have some sort of strategy in place for how to get that thing out of your life. So you definitely don't want to just knock it with a broom and then not have a strategy. It's best if you well, I don't know about bees, but I know at least with like wasps, if you're going to take it down, you do it at night when they're asleep. You get wasp spray that you're 20 or 40 feet away. There's kind of this whole, and there's a strategy behind it. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So, Demetria says, I frustrated myself for years trying to tell my ex husband about himself. He would turn it around on me, sometimes staying silent. When I think it's resolved, you get back with the most vindictive things. Yes, and that's a really big sign, is to see. I mean, nobody likes criticism, right? It's very difficult for most people to handle criticism. But if a person A person, in order to be in a relationship or a friendship or a work environment or whatever, needs to really be team oriented enough to kind of put aside their hurt feelings and go into solutions oriented mode. And with most narcissists, they don't put their hurt feelings aside. They have kind of this paper thin ego that they can't handle criticism whatsoever. And then they go on the attack. It's a very immature way of handling things. And when they do go on the attack, they, they, they really, it's that whole fight mode. Like they try to win. And when there, it's not even about winning, right? It's like if you're in a marriage or a friendship, it's about seeking a solution, but they become so angry and hostile that they start throwing out anything that they know is a weak point for you or a soft spot and use that as ammunition. Like for them, it doesn't register of there's rules for fighting. Like there's certain things that you just don't say because you can't unsay them. And it's about learning how to fight fair, which is a sign of emotional maturity. But a lot of, narcissists in general just don't have that. They're kind of stuck at this level of being, 6 years old when it comes to their emotional maturity. And it's, I mean, really difficult to have an adult relationship with a 6-year-old. Mm. Carolyn says, yeah, not only has he figured out who I am, but he has created hundreds of fake Facebook profiles pretending to be my friends, family members, etc. I've been reporting them to Facebook. Is this just feeding into it? Obviously, this guy's got a lot of time on his hands, and people like that, you know, he's a troll. He's an internet troll, is what he is right at this point. If I were you, I would create a the thing with Facebook, this is the challenge, is it would be great if they could just block his IP address, and they don't do that for whatever reason. So continuing to report these accounts, I mean, you report one, they take it down, he'll pop up 3 more. It's all about dominance, power and control with people like that. And so there comes a point where it's just wasting your time and energy. And I it's a game for him that he's trying to win, and it's a sad little game. So I would just bow out of it and either create a whole different Facebook profile or just stay off of Facebook for a while. I would probably create a whole new profile. So let's say if your real name is Sarah Smith, I would create a Facebook profile by the name of like something like Rachel Williams, like something totally different, and or even a guy's name. That might be a good one because he might not be that clever to think that you would be posing as a guy. So, you know, Raphael Williams or something instead, and then just get some pictures of some guy and put those up as your profile pictures and communicate with your friends and family that way. But, you know, just, ugh, exhausting. Shay says, yeah, I changed my name and social security number because nothing else worked, but totally cutting off every avenue. Yeah. That there's only been a handful of times where I've seen women that have had to go to that extent. And that was something when I was working at the domestic violence shelter. It was, I mean, I could count on one hand how many women actually had to go that route, but sometimes it does take that completely just going off the grid and starting over, and sometimes starting over across the country. And it's sad that people have to do that, but if you're dealing with a complete psycho and you're really concerned about your safety or the safety of your children, sometimes that's exactly what it takes. Ingrid says, my 40-year-old son has tormented me for 12 years. There is not much out there about narcissistic children. Yeah, you're right. There isn't. A lot of parents do struggle with this, though, especially with, um, narcissistic or sociopathic or psychopathic children, where especially if they're minors. I mean, thankfully, yours is 40 years old. Hopefully, he's out of the house and that you're able to have some sort of boundaries with him. But my heart really goes out because a lot of people have this idea of families forever and forgive and forget, and he's your son, you only get one, or that kind of mentality of, oh, it's your child, you just need to love them unconditionally, which then gets very confused with you need to allow them in your life unconditionally. And it must be incredibly difficult to just be like, I have a predatorial, dangerous and destructive child, and trying to kind of mourn that loss of, this is my child and I wish things were different. I always wanted something different, but this person's dangerous and I have to distance myself, and not having, I think there probably be very few people who would actually support something like that, because if you haven't experienced a narcissist or a sociopath or a psychopath, then you just don't realize the amount of destruction that they can do. So I'm sorry that you're going through that. Okay, let's see. Yeah, thanks, Missouri. Missouri Cowboy says, "Yeah, I'm sorry you've had to experience a child narcissist. Uh, Dana's Facebook group is a good resource for asking questions and getting support." Yeah, we do. We have a handful of parents in there that are struggling with this as well. And that might be something else to consider, is looking online and joining different groups on narcissistic abuse. And my guess is that you will find other parents that are going through something similar. Samuel, great question, asks, "What do you do if you kind of know the new guy that your ex narcissist is seeing? I should warn him, no?" The hard part with that is that if she has he's probably not going to believe you. And especially if she tends to come across as really charismatic, very passionate, if he's kind of getting caught up in this whirlwind where he's feeling like he's met a soulmate or this ideal person, and of course she's going to be planting seeds this whole time, that you were probably manipulative or abusive or crazy or jealous or what have you. And so if you do start talking to him about it, he's probably gonna chalk it up to, "Oh, he's just this crazy ex that she's got." And then this can also inadvertently turn him into a flying monkey, because he's like, well, because he's probably gonna go ask her about it, right? He's gonna be like, "Hey, man, Samuel, I this is so weird. He messaged me on Facebook and he was saying that, like, you're a liar and that you're crazy." And so because he's not going to want to believe what you say. So, and this is what we all do, right? So if we don't want to believe this kind of new information that we get, especially about a problematic person, what we tend to mistakenly do is then go ask the problematic person for clarification. Well, you can see how that's flawed logic, right? Because of course, if they're a liar and they're manipulative, they're not going to be honest with us. So if he's going to go to her and try to get verification of all this, then she's just going to say, "Man, this guy was so nuts. Like, we know we dated for however long and he just wouldn't leave me alone. And I can't believe this." And then he's most likely going to become very protective and defensive and be like, "Man, this is ridiculous. Like, he's jealous of us. I'm going to go try to fight this guy," or what have you. If you ever This goes for anybody. If you ever want to try to warn the next person, because this is a very common thing with all of us that have been through this, where, like, I feel this kind of moral or social obligation to try to spare the next person. If you do approach somebody, again, going in with the plan, right? So thinking, how are they gonna perceive that? I would tell him, so think about the different things, some of the earlier signs that you notice, some of the things that she did to you, because odds are she's gonna continue that pattern. So if she cheated on you, if she lied to you, if, she said that she had a bunch of male friends, but really she was out, sleeping around, that kind of stuff. I would just, you know, if you do end up contacting him, which again, that can release the other flying monkeys and it can cause her to go on the attack too. But if you do contact him, you can say something like, "Hey man, I really wanted to talk to you about," we'll just call her Sasha. "I really wanted to talk to you about Sasha. She's I know she comes across as like a really great chick. She's really fun to hang out with. And I know, you know, kind of what have you. I just want to let you know that I just want to give you a heads up because I feel like it's the right thing to do. I don't expect you to believe me. So here's what I just from guy to guy, here's what I experienced. Like she told me she had all these male friends, dude, she's sleeping with most of them. She told me, that she was in school and she's not. She told me that like she borrowed, $1,000 from me and she never repaid it. I'm just telling you, like, you don't need to believe me. I'm just trying to give you a heads up. So if the same stuff starts happening with you, you won't be in there as long as I was in there, and you're not going to deal with all the crap that I'm dealing with now. And then just walk away. So, like, you're not trying to prove anything. You're not trying to, like, you know, get him to see your point of view. You're just letting him know, like, yeah, if she starts disappearing for days on end, and if she starts telling you all these guys are friends, or if she starts making like subtle put downs about whatever, you'll realize that it's not you, that it's her. And it's very normal too. Sam was saying, I've been thinking about her nonstop. Yeah. And it's very common, especially it's if you've gone through a lot with her, there's been a lot of like highs and lows, which is actually that's one of like the number one signs of an abusive relationship is the good times are really good, the bad times are really bad. Or if she just kind of upped and disappeared, or uh, I don't know exactly what all went on in your situation, but that those levels of intensity tend to keep us really focused on a person because a lot of things are unresolved. There's not a lot of closure. There's not a lot of answers. So people tend to wonder, is it me? Is it them? Could this have worked? Is she really a narcissist? Or maybe I'm just, blowing things out of proportion. Maybe I could be friends with her, maybe not. Maybe were things really that bad? And maybe there was some truth to that. And there's just kind of all of this rehashing and this confusion and these questions and all of it. But so none of that's normal. Like perpetual confusion in a relationship is not normal. In a normal, healthy, I should say, in a healthy relationship, anything that's confusing can be cleared up with generally a pretty short conversation. So if it's this, things that are unanswered, behavior that's squirrely, um, crazy making, if you're feeling like you're losing your mind, you're losing your sanity, you don't know who has the problem, if it's me, if it's her, if it's him, you're kind of feeling like your sanity is being eroded. That generally is a great sign that you're being psychologically abused and manipulated, which really is the same thing. So, uh, yep. So true. Maria says, yes, we only leave when we are ready. We won't believe anyone, not even our close friends, when we want to stay. Yes. And that's the challenge with actually helping somebody in an abusive relationship is that fog of cognitive dissonance. It just like any other fog, it rises and then it lowers. So when the fog rises and the person seeing things clearly, they get it. They're like, you know what? That person's manipulative. They're abusive. I'm tired of it. This is not healthy. This is ridiculous. This is abuse. I got to get out of here. And they're all gung ho. And then they get a text from the person, or they hear their favorite song, or the person comes back with promises of change, or something happens. And then boom, next thing you know, they're back in that fog again and hoping things will work, hoping this time it'll be different. And and maybe it will be different, but generally only for a short time. That's known as, in the more traditional cycle of abuse, that's like the honeymoon stage, where they're on their really great behavior. It's like a switch flipped, and you think, man, this is so amazing. That one conversation really seemed to turn the light on for them, and like they get it now. Or, boy, they were in therapy. We were in couples therapy for 2 sessions, and it's amazing. I didn't realize that we had all these real issues in our relationship. And now they've been so solutions oriented and so communicative. And, but then deep down, they're kind of wondering, like, what's wrong? Why do I have issues with trust? Is what people tend to normally say. What's wrong with me? Why do I have issues with trust? The reality is, you don't have issues with trust. You're trying to convince yourself to trust an untrustworthy person. And that's where that mental anguish is coming from. But other people that have never been in this type of situation will oftentimes, it's all of these platitudes that we tell people, forgive and forget, and you got to try again, and marriage is forever, and all of, commitment takes two, or relationship issues take two, which is even more confusing and damaging. And so then that person's lost in the fog thinking, like, well, what's my part in it? But the whole time, the real issue with this is, it's making the distinction between a communication issue and a character issue. So if a person has a character issue, if they have a pervasive, persistent, problematic personality, or they lie, they cheat, they steal, they have no moral compass, and or they're abusive in other ways, that's character. And that's not PC, right? We live in this PC culture where it's not politically correct to be like, yeah, this person has absolutely rotten character, rotten to the bone. PC culture wants to be like, but everybody can change. Love cures everything. We're all created equal, and we're not. And it's because we're just eating up that garbage that we're not seeing this stuff clearly, including many people in the mental health field. So, there's this idea, I think, kind of in pop psychology, where, no apple is rotten. Which is crazy, because if a person's like studied psychology, you'd realize that there's many different types of psychology, and most of them talk about personality being developed fairly young, how certain things, don't change. You've got the DSM that talks about personality disorders and says, like, these are pervasive, persistent, problematic patterns of behavior, pretty fixed. The needle doesn't move a whole lot. Once a person's personality is that way, you know, that's kind of how they are. So I don't know. It's weird. It's weird how there's still all this confusion about that. So you've got character issues, and then you've got communication issues. And communication issues don't result in pathological behavior of any kind: lying, stealing, cheating, manipulating, any of this stuff. So, and and a great way to tell the difference is it an event, or is it a pattern? Does this person have a pattern of, not having a moral compass? Then I would believe that. Like, therapy is not going to fix that. Therapy is not going to fix a person's broken moral compass. Like, you're better off spending your time and energy and money going to Disney World, like doing anything other than trying to get them to change. So, but it's so many of us, myself included, we go through life thinking that people are kind of inherently good and like us. And the reality is, people are people. And there's a wide mix of them out there. And not everybody is like us. I mean, most people probably are not like us, or I should say, not like you. And that's the challenge in all of this, is seeing other people's behavior clearly, and then responding accordingly, instead of seeing them how we want them to be. And it's just very difficult. Is this kind of stuff's not even on most people's radar. Very good. Standing firm says, I'm finally to the point where I'm brave enough to set boundaries and I'm no longer afraid of losing somebody because of it. That's huge. That's huge. And I think, too, one of the things that really helps with that realization is uh, realizing that there's nothing to lose. If you realize this is this person's behavior is damaging, it's destructive, it's disempowering, it's toxic, it's poison to me. And if I set boundaries thinking, okay, I'm going to give this a chance, we're going to see if this can work. And if they continue to cross them and they continue to prove you right, that they are, in fact, poison to you, then to realize there's nothing there to even hold on to. Like it was all a mirage to begin with. It's just this toxic cloud that I've got to let go because there's nothing there, you know? I think sometimes kind of realizing thinking of it in terms of that, that there's nothing there to even hold on to, it can help to walk away. It's sort of like when people say, "Oh, I really love him or her." I keep going back, I really love them. And and of course that causes a lot of mental anguish because they're like, well, what's wrong with me? Why do I love somebody who's so toxic or abusive or what have you? But I mean, I love him, but I should hate him, but I love him, but and then they're so confused. But the reality is you don't love them. You love the fantasy of them, or you love the fantasy that they led you to believe who they were. So getting very clear in your mind and realizing the person that they are and the person that you hope they could be, or the person that they led you to believe that they were, are two very different things. And once you can see that difference, then it's a lot easier to mourn the loss of what you hoped could be or the loss of what they presented themselves as initially. And then it doesn't cause as much mental anguish because odds are the person that you hoped they could be or the person that they pretended to be was probably a pretty awesome person. Most of us probably would have liked a lot of characteristics about that person, but the reality of who they are, the lack of empathy, the lack of remorse, the lies, the cheating, the stealing, the, you know, the psychological abuse, that all of that, nobody misses that. And that's the core of what they are, and for us to see that kind of stuff and then to respond accordingly. Mariella says, talking about boundaries, I can't tell you how liberating it is. Although I'm currently in the phase of feeling guilty for respecting my boundaries, I'm working on it. Yeah, it does get easier with time. It's very difficult at first. And actually, speaking about boundaries, this kind of ties into the whole sensory deprivation tank that I had done earlier today, and how I was saying, man, I really was storing all of this tension in my shoulders and neck. And I'd kind of known it for a little while now, but I did not realize that it was to the point where my arms were going numb or that it was this much of an issue. The point being is the importance of body awareness. And this is something that most of us, I mean, I don't think anybody gets past the age of 10 without them being separated from a sense of body awareness. And because we're so separated from that we're so pulled apart from that, either through our parents, through our friends, through religion, through society, kind of through what have you. uh, Most people aren't aware of when a situation is problematic, and it's a big part in healing from all of this is really getting in tune, is re connecting that part of yourself, is reconnecting with your body and body awareness and your feelings. And so here's some examples of how this happens at a young age and how this happens unintentionally. A lot of us do this. I've done this. Where let's say for example, a little kid trips and falls and they scrape up their knee, right? And let's say they're like 3 years old and you kind of know if you run over there and you're like, "Oh my goodness, are you okay?" that they're really going to let the floodgates open and they're going to scream and they're going to cry. And most adults, because we're trying to avoid that kind of a scene for whatever reason, generally because it's unpleasant and it's loud and it's not something that we want to deal with, we tell the child, "You're fine, you're fine." And that kind of stuff, even though the intentions aren't, nefarious or malicious, it serves to really separate that child from their emotions because they're not fine. They fell down, they hurt themselves. It hurts, especially when you're that young because you don't have that many other references for that kind of pain. So falling down, falling off a bike the first time is really scary because it's never happened to you before. Same thing with a teenager. If their first love is broken up with them, they're emotionally devastated. And it's not because they're just a moody teenager, it's because they've never experienced emotional pain like that before. And so it can be really difficult for us as adults to empathize with it when we've had so many more experiences of falling down and skinning our knee or of having our heart broken or our relationships end. And so it's remembering to I think just have empathy for that other person and that it's okay to cry and to be upset and to not just chalk it up to, oh, they're being drama because they're 3 or oh, they're being drama because they're 16. It's to take that seriously. Like, no, they're human beings that are experiencing pain. And it's normal and appropriate for a 3-year-old to cry really loud when they're hurt like that. Just because it's inconvenient for us is not an excuse to try to silence them. So, those are kind of some of the things that we do unintentionally as adults to small children, but then even as the child gets older, because we don't want to deal with their emotions, we'll oftentimes kind of just downplay it. And the whole, you'll be okay. It's not that bad. Uh, oh, it's not that scary. That's another, Halloween for certain little kids. And especially, man, I tell you, the more years that pass, the more scary Halloween stuff has really become. When I was a kid, you had those, plastic masks you got at Walgreens or whatever. And, people didn't go all out like they do. You didn't have, it's freaking traumatic. Like some of these people's, front of their houses, it's like a zombie farm or whatever. And, if you're 6 years old, that can be really scary. And so we can lose sight of that if a child is terrified or if they wet their pants because they see a big kid come to the door who's dressed like a zombie and then they can't sleep for the next few nights and we get upset because they want to sleep in the bed or sleep on the floor or they don't want to be alone and we're trying to tell them, oh, it's not that scary. And it's like, well, actually, obviously it is to them. So to I guess for us to kind of realize the importance of respecting other people's bodily awareness, or at least opening up that conversation to kids when they're having those kinds of feelings of like, yeah, that haunted house is pretty scary. Do you want to go through it? And and honestly, that 6-year-old might be more okay with it than you are, right? Like it just depends on the child. But just making sure that you're talking about these things, that they're okay with expressing these different like pain and fear and hurt and all of that. Um, we do this too with children when they get sick. Oh, you're fine. like you don't have a fever, so you're fine, or you only have a slight fever, so you're fine. And but again, really, it's I don't want to be inconvenienced because you don't feel good, which no, it's not very nice. Um, Oh, trying to think of so then kind of as they get older, well, I shouldn't even say that. Even like body awareness. It's this idea of, okay, go give go give grandpa a hug, go give Aunt Janice, go sit on her lap, go do this. And so then the child's not in charge of their body. And if they're resistant, if they're like, you know what, grandpa kind of freaks me out, or Aunt Janice just kind of freaks me out, or what have you, they're like, no, 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 go do that. You're being rude. I mean, how many of us were taught like you just need to do as you're told, not how you feel? And so all of those feelings of uneasiness, and of course, especially when you're a kid, you don't, you don't really know why you might be uneasy about certain things. But if that's so as adults, when we're pushing that child of, well, no, go let Uncle Roger tuck you in, or grandma's going to go give you a bath, or these kinds of things. Or for a lot, what I see a lot of adults do is they start referring to virtual strangers as aunt and uncle, which creates this false sense of security for a child. Oh, well, that's just Uncle Billy. And it's like, well, actually, no, that's the neighbor, and I've met him twice, and now you're thinking that it's okay for me to hang out, like be alone with him. It's just it's inappropriate. So to reinstill this within children of, okay, how do you feel? And it's okay to say no, and you have the right to your body. And so if you're not okay with going and giving grandma a kiss on the cheek, or sitting on Uncle Billy's lap, or doing these things, that's okay. It's okay. And if other people think it's rude, then so be it. That's where I think we as adults need to just draw that line and just say, it doesn't really matter what anybody else thinks. Like, I'm trying to teach my child to pay attention to their intuition and their feelings. Like, they might really really like Uncle Billy, but maybe they don't feel good that night. Maybe they're tired, maybe they're just in a rotten mood and they're just done and they want to go home. Like, they don't feel like being, they're not some sort of circus animal that you're like, okay, perform for me. It's sort of like, I'm just done. I'm 4 years old, I'm tired, it's late, I'm hungry, I'm over it. Like, I don't want to be friendly with Uncle Billy, I just want to go home. So, those kinds of things, because as we get older, and especially as we start dating, as we get jobs, as we, meet other new people, and we're more in charge of our life and our these different circles in our life, like our inner circle and, careers and those kinds of things. We're so used to doing kind of what's polite, or discounting how we feel, like, oh, I must be making too big of a deal out of this, that we don't give that feeling, that intuition, that intuitive feeling, the credit and the weight that it deserves. And then of course down the road, this causes a lot of problems for all of us. So it's important. Standing Firm says, Dana's podcasts on Castbox are so good. They have helped so much. Well, I'm so glad. Thank you. Yeah, it is on cha 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 iTunes and Stitcher, and on my website, and I think, what is it? Blog Talk Radio also. So they're out there. I'm glad that they help. And for everybody, some people have recently left reviews. Thank you so much. That helps my podcast to get found. And especially on iTunes, it's an incredibly difficult, the most unuser friendly platform they have, which is, I don't know, you wouldn't think that Apple would have invented something so complicated like that, but it's a challenge to learn how to, or to figure out how to leave a review on iTunes, but it really does matter. So if you've done that, I appreciate it. New Beginning says, yeah, therapists can give you more trauma than you started with. They for sure can, if they're operating from that mindset that communication can fix everything. And because I will tell you, like, cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, CBT and DBT are fantastic skills. But if a person If a mental health clinician is not able to tell the difference between a communication issue and a character issue, and because abuse is all about power and control, it's, domination and deceit. If they can't tell the difference between that, then using that cognitive behavioral therapy and that dialectical behavioral therapy is going to unintentionally gaslight the patient, their client. And actually it kind of turns them on the side of the abuser. It causes a lot of psychological abuse unintentionally, um, because it's sort of like, well, let's really work on you and how you process your feelings and your emotions and the events, and it really kind of works to turn the target into this emotional pretzel when it takes, you know, there is no relationship present with a person when there's a character issue at play, because it's not a relationship issue, it's an individual issue and it's their issue. And it's, you know, our individual issue is going to be on working towards moving ourselves to a place of safety and sanity and developing the boundaries to ward off all of this other well-intended bad advice and kind of dysfunctional people that think that it's all a communication issue and that try to continue to push us back into it, especially if that abusive person is family. It's very strange. It's sort of like this idea that if if abuse is happening between a husband and wife or between a boyfriend and a girlfriend, then it's a problem. But if it's happening between a guy, if the abuser is female, if the abuser is in a gay relationship, if the abuser is really old, if they're 87 years old and they're abusing their adult children, or if the abusive person is, like we were talking about earlier, is the child and they're abusing the parent, all any other type of dynamic that does not fit into this little box of male abuser, female target, and they're married, it's just like it's invisible. And that's a problem. And I should also add, if there's not extreme physical abuse involved. It's just not seen by most people, it's frustrating. Samuel asks, "Is it possible that a covert narcissist isn't aware of her behavior?" She's aware of her behavior, she might not be aware that I don't it's such a blanket answer for me to give, and I because 'cause they're abusive people are all different, and she may or may not be aware of, like, her motivations behind it. Like, some people are just really emotionally immature and very damaging. But here's the deal, between kind of an abusive person and, like, a quote unquote normal person with bad behavior. If a normal person has bad behavior, let's say they're acting in a way, uh, oh, I don't know. They say something hurtful, for example, you know, um, and you call them on it and you say, "Hey, you know what? That's, like, really not okay. Or that really hurt my feelings." Or, uh, "You showed up, you keep saying that you're gonna be here um, and you're not." A normal person will own it and just say, "You know what? I'm really sorry. I didn't," even if they didn't, like, "I didn't mean it that way," or "I totally forgot," or what have you. They may even try to give that explanation. Most people do, right? I mean, I do. Like, if somebody calls me out, they're like, "You said," like, for example, I totally forgot that I was supposed to go walking with a friend of mine the other day. Totally forgot, and I felt terrible. And so, and that was, so I told him, I said, "This is my, I completely spaced it out in my mind. We were supposed to do something later on in the day and what have you." And he was fine with it. But I guess what I'm saying is normal people, like, they own, we might not have perfect behavior all the time, but we own it and say, "This is what happened. I'm sorry. I will really work so that it doesn't happen again." And then it generally doesn't happen again. So that's the difference. But a person like a narcissist, especially, or an abusive person, will continue they'll fight you on that. "Oh, well, I guess you never make a mistake, or you're too sensitive." They're denying what you're saying. So, especially when it comes to verbal abuse. So, because again, this goes back to a lot of times verbal abusers, they lack that empathy. So, they lack that ability to see if they tell you, boy, you sure are chunking up. You need to start watching your weight because it didn't happen to them. It doesn't hurt their feelings. To them, they're like, hey, man, I just call it like I see it. Like, I'm just being honest. But if you were to tell them, "Hey man, I see you've been gaining some weight," then they get really, really hurt. And but it's like they don't understand that their actions cause other people pain. It's just it's but that's the thing, like you can't work with something like that. I mean, it's really difficult to get through to a person, this, this is hurtful, don't do this. Like quit arguing with me. Um just because you think it's funny. So again, like if somebody were to tell me, "Hey, Dana, you've really got big ears," or I don't know, whatever. And if they thought they were being funny, but for me, I'm like, that's not funny. Like that was actually that really hurt my feelings. If I say to them, "Hey, you know what? Like that's not funny to me. Like that really hurt my feelings." If they continue to fight that, and a lot of people that are emotionally immature they will do that. If they say, "Oh, lighten up," or you're just too serious, or you need to learn how to take a joke. If they're fighting you on that, and if you explain to them, "This hurt my feelings, don't do that again," and they continue, and you can tell like they don't see the big deal in it, then that's when you need to distance yourself from that person because they really it's going to continue to happen because there's no acknowledgement for them that they did anything wrong. Little Miss says, talking to Samuel, uh, this gal, she's not the only narcissist in the world. And if you don't fix your own issues, it's likely you will attract another one. So let's talk about that for a little bit too, because uh, the whole attraction thing is narcissists are just like other people. Like they're going to be attracted to a wide g- like group of people, a wide range of people. So it's less about worrying about who we attract, and it's more about what we are attracted to and why, and how long we let the wrong people stay in our lives. And unfortunately, because this stuff's not taught, you know, we might find ourselves with a problematic person in our life and be still operating from all of these old mindsets that we have, right? Like we were talking about earlier, oh, forgive and forget, and relationships take two people to make it work, and all relationship issues involve two people, and communication solves everything. If we're still operating from this outdated, uh, wrong, inaccurate programming, then the odds are we're going to continue to allow the wrong people in our lives and not realize kind of we're not going to be able to break the cycle of why. And um, generally, emotional manipulators, they tend to, by and large, but not all the time, but they tend to come across as very intense, very likable, very charismatic, and they move quickly and they start this kind of whirlwind. If you haven't watched my Red Flags of a Narcissist series, I would recommend watching that video series. It really talks about like different red flags of problematic behavior. I also did a video series. I just need to change the name of it 'cause I never liked it. I was just doing it because I thought that'd be what most people would search for. But I did a video series called Red Flags of Codependency. And so Samuel, I would encourage you to watch those. If you don't watch any other videos, watch those videos. The red flags of codependency, especially like there's one on love bombing. And I think there's one in that video series on why do we like how to avoid dating a narcissist or something like that in the future. And those videos talk a lot about kind of what love bombing is, what our empty buckets are, kind of how they operate and how and why we tend to get sucked into it, and how and why we tend to stay. And so once you can see the pattern in this, then hopefully you'll be able to break it. Because what tends to happen is when a person is in a relationship or a friendship like this, and this was my experience too, they tend to feel like that they just got in a hit and run accident. This was a one-time thing. They got involved with this really like, outrageously personality disordered person. And then they start looking up all this research on personality disorders. And like, well, I guess it's only, 1 to 3% of the people out there. What are the odds it'll happen to me again? And so then it's not on their radar. And the reality is there's a lot of really problematic people out there. I would say it's at least 10% of the population. Like there's a lot out there. And so it's important that that's on your radar. And it's important, there's so many things that are important. It's important for you to examine how you feel when you're around a person that's toxic to you, and that you can feel validated in realizing that you don't have to wait around, whether it's a relationship, a friendship, a work situation, family, whatever. You don't need to wait around until things get really, really bad in order to walk away. And that was a big thing that it took me. I'm 40, so it took me many, many years to get to that point of realizing that, because that was what I thought is, well, it's not so bad if I can still tolerate it. And And it is a problem. It's just that our new normal with that person just gets worse and worse and worse until we finally get to the point where we're like, I can no longer tolerate that. But when you get to that point, then it's a big problem. And, this is a real challenge too when people are dating. A lot of the messages that men tend to get with emotionally manipulative women is this stuff is justified by lots of people out there. Okay, so they might say, oh well, she's just emotional, or you know what, she's beautiful and that's why she's so crazy. All beautiful women are crazy, and that's not true. Or, oh, she's had a bad childhood. Or trying to think of other ways that they excuse. I think a lot of it's just like, oh well, just all women are like that. And there's a lot of women that are like that, but they're not all like that. So it's very important for you to be, I call it focusing on being choosy instead of being chosen. And it's really hard, right? Like when you're dating and you're like, man, this woman I really want her to like me. She seems really intelligent. She's super hot. She likes the same music as I do. Like she's in all the same classes that I'm in school or what have you. But it's really important that we can, instead of trying to be like, I hope she dates me, I hope she picks me, to change that around and be like, is this the kind of woman that I want in my life? Because we fall in love with personality, at least up front. And the personality of an emotional manipulator can seem awesome. It can really feel like you've met your soulmate. The personality, we fall in love with personality, but you live with character. So the lying, the cheating, the stealing, the crazy making, the controlling, the nonsense, that would be what you're marrying. And, you know, it's really important to be super picky about it and to not let other people try to justify stuff that's not justifiable. Kevin, great point, says, yeah, or that they're like that, but at a normal level and not a severe level. Yeah, that goes back to that whole mindset of if I can still handle it, then it's not a problem. Or what a lot of people do, myself included, is to think, to use the most problematic person that we've had in our life as our baseline for what's a problem. So it's like, well, um, somebody was saying in the support group the other day, they're like, I was married to this man. Her father was incredibly physically abusive. She went to bed crying almost every single night. She lived in fear of him. It was this really traumatic childhood. And so when she married her husband, he was verbally abusive and emotionally and psychologically, but he didn't beat her like her father did. And so in her mind, she's like, well, I didn't go to bed crying every single night and I wasn't getting hit. So therefore, I thought that that was okay. And so this, I mean, it's such a, and it's obviously it's not okay. Like no abuse is okay. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if that person had a bad childhood or if they are a drug addict or if they're an alcoholic or if they're, really young or if they're really old or if they're dying or if they're had a bad day or if it's you forgot to buy ketchup at the store or it doesn't matter. Like there's no excuse for abuse. And so it's important that we realize it's important that we realize what a problematic situation actually is for us. And and to be able to also realize and identify what is a healthy situation for you. Because just like, I mean, I can kind of give you some guidelines, right? So like a problematic situation is really anything that's, it's controlling, it's crazy making, it's condescending, it's constantly critical, it's they're being used, abused, exploited, or neglected. Like that would fall in the category of problematic. Healthy situation is, open, honest, sincere, solutions oriented communication. It's you feel empowered, you feel energized, you feel comfortable being around that person. It's um, and that level of comfort can be boring for a lot of people, especially if they're used to the highs and lows of an abusive relationship and they're confusing that level of intensity with something positive, and it's not. That emotional roller coaster is not that's not love. It's a trauma bond. But um in a healthy relationship, there's kind of this equal give and take. There's this open communication. It's kind of the right soil for which you to grow, right? It's the kind of your environment. But then it becomes a very individualized thing. It's very much kind of what makes you you. So and what's important to you. So for example, if sports is a really big thing to you, then it might be really important for you to find a woman who is either okay with you watching sports or you playing sports, or at a minimum can go entertain herself while you go do that. So it's kind of figuring out like, okay, what am I going to compromise on and what am I not going to compromise on? If you are in a band and that's a big thing for you, then to be able, you don't want to like you're like, I like playing the guitar, I'm going to play the guitar, then to find supportive people that are okay with you playing the guitar. Do you see what I'm saying? So I don't watch sports and I don't play a guitar. So for me, I wouldn't care if a person's into that or not. But if that's a big thing for you, this is where it gets down to that individual thing. So knowing what juices you and what things that you need in your own life, and then to find other people around you that respect that. So okay, let's see. Samuel says, I almost went MGTOW due to the stress. Yeah, I I could totally see it. I think a lot of guys go MGTOW for that exact reason, you know? So, and here's the other thing too, speaking of that, is there's problematic people out there and they're any gender, male, female, they can, be gay, they can be straight, they can be young, they can be old. What I see a lot of is people that go through an abusive relationship And they so I work primarily with I shouldn't say work, because that's I don't. Like, it's more of like I encounter, that's a better word, encounter a lot of people in my community, more so with women, than men. There's probably, I don't know, maybe 5% or so of the community that's men, because I don't think most men realize that they're being abused, frankly, is why there's not more of them. But anyhow, what I see a lot of women do is they get to this point where they kind of do the female version of MGTOW, and they're like, you know what, I'm done. I don't need men. I don't want men. Men are awful. All men suck. I'm done. And they just kind of peace out when it comes to men. I get why men are done with women, and I get why women are done with men. But I tell you what tends to happen is that then, because what happens is people start linking up incorrect cause and effect. And so for a lot of people, they're like, well, you know what? I'm never going to date a redhead again, or I'm never going to date, a younger guy again, or I'm never going to date an attorney again, or I'm never going to date a Scorpio again. And they start kind of looking, because they don't realize like because if a person's thinking that all people are inherently the same and that all issues are communication issues, if they don't realize that it's character issues and there's a lot of very specific behaviors around these character issues, then they're going to be kind of throwing darts trying to figure out what exactly is problematic about this other person. And so um So, and then what I see a lot of women do is then, okay, then they swear off men, and then they think, you know what, I'm just done with men. Men are the problem. And then they might even decide, well, I'm going to start dating women. And then they're shocked to find themselves in relationships with abusive women, because it's not even on their radar that women can be abusive. And so then they're kind of lost in this fog of confusion and then they might just get to the point where they're like, you know what, I'm just cursed. That's what it is. I'm cursed, and I'm just done, and I'm going to be alone. But it's until a person realizes that it's a character thing and other people are not like you, and to go slow, because everybody's on their best behavior for especially those first 30 to 90 days. The odds of us continuing to crash into these kind of personalities, it's going to keep repeating. And so it's really easy for people to link up, you know, that men are the problem, or that women are the problem, or that, whatever, French people are the problem, or that, younger, older, redheads, blondes, you name it, is the problem. And it's not the problem. It's the behavior that's the problem. So, and I think it's important that we open up kind of these conversations, because when I see a lot of the MGTOW movement, and I've watched quite a few of their videos, and at first I was, as a woman, I was pretty upset, and I was actually horrified by what I saw, and I became really angry, and it was very hard for me to put that anger aside and to try to figure out what was going on, what were their experiences, and why were they feeling that way. And so, you know, I can see, there's been a lot of guys out there that have been really taken advantage of, and, uh, you know, used, abused, exploited, or neglected. And there's a lot of, there's a lot of that message that I think does have validity to it, as far as, there's this idea that women should be treated like princesses, and that men are just somehow stupid oafs with a wallet. And I think a lot of guys are getting sick of this mentality of that they don't matter, that the woman is the only one in the relationship that matters. So you know, there's some stuff there, but to me, that if men wanna go their own way, if they wanna remain single, they never wanna get married, those kinds of things, that's totally up to them. Um, I probably will never get married again. I just don't see at this point, I mean, I'm 40. Like, I don't there's not a lot see no benefit in getting married again. But, that's a whole nother discussion. But I guess my main concern with MGTOW, people are gonna do what they're gonna do. They're gonna believe the way that they're gonna believe. My concern is if men don't see that it's not just women that are like this, if this can happen to them at work or with their family or with different guy friends or what have you, then my main concern is that's not gonna be on their radar. So it can happen to them being used, abused, or exploited like that can happen to them, you know, by anybody. So to not just narrow it down on a gender. SP says, Dana, I put myself in $18,000 with the debt trying to help my ex girlfriend, trying to climb out of that hole now. It hurts. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's one of the messages too that a lot of men get is it is oftentimes this kind of white knight message of, you know, like you got to protect this woman, you've got to help her out, you've got to by any means necessary. And that's a problem, right? So it's any time when we're sinking ourselves trying to save somebody else, oh gosh, yikes, then it's a problem. And sometimes when we do oh wait, this is crooked. Now I can see. That might just have to be crooked. That's gonna have to be crooked. Okay. Sometimes that money that we spend, you know, in these situations, most people, I think, if they've encountered a narcissist of any kind, are out some sort of money. I know I am. So I think the way I look at it is I just consider it tuition at the school of hard knocks. And sometimes that kind of money spent in that kind of way is some of the best money that you'll ever spend because you will never forget that lesson. So I can't tell you how many college classes I've had or that were a total waste of money. It was a hoop to jump through because I needed to have college algebra or I needed to have, you know, some kind of stupid class like, science writing. Or a lot. I've had lots of really college classes that I either learned nothing from or they were just awful or what have you. So I figure, I've spent probably close to that in college classes that got me nowhere. So, you know, you just, it's the whole saying, sometimes you win and sometimes you learn. And Kevin says, yeah, financial abuse is a thing. Yes, it is. It really, really is. Speaking to like the whole gender thing is when I first started doing these videos, I was getting a lot of emails from women that were in lesbian relationships and men that were in gay relationships, and they were so confused because they're like, well, because again, it kind of the dynamic that they were in didn't fit this idea of what a stereotypical abusive relationship looked like. It's like, well, my abuser is female, or my abuser is a guy, but I'm a guy, so that can't be. Or my abuser for men is smaller than me, or for a guy to be like, you know what, she's only 5 feet tall and I'm 6'4" and I'm terrified of her. So it's really, abuse it's about power and control, and it's not about gender and strength. So SP says that's a good point. Lesson learned. Too bad it took me finding out she was cheating for me to learn. Yeah. And sometimes, with those kinds of things, it's like, you dodged a bullet. The longer you would have been there, the more expensive it would have been. Oh, let's see here. New Chris says, my ex was more towards a sociopath and basically a celebrity. Nobody who knows her would ever believe. Yeah. Yeah. Most of the time, and here's the other thing too with abusive people, is we all have this idea that an abusive person, that we would somehow know an abusive person when we saw him. That they all somehow look like Charles Manson. Like, if only the problematic people of the world all looked like Charles Manson, that I would celebrate, because you can see that level of crazy coming. You look at the guy and you're like, and I'm going to cross the street and lock my door. Like, that guy is obviously a problem. Where it gets more difficult is when somebody doesn't fit that mold. Lots of abusive people are charming, they smile, they're good looking, um, they might be incredibly successful, they might be dressed really well, they might really like being around children, they might like animals, they might come across as, and oftentimes they do come across as really great people. But then those flashes of abusive behavior start up. And so it's really confusing for a person, because not only are they emotionally invested in keeping that relationship together, but it's then they're confused because they're like, well, I mean, I know things are bad, but uh things can also be really pretty good too. And since they're not 100% bad, then I don't feel justified in walking away. But that's another myth that's floating out there, is this idea that abusive people always look abusive, and that they're always abusive 100% of the time. Sort of like the husband in Sleeping with the Enemy. The guy looked like an angry, scary, abusive dude 100% of the time. And very rarely is that the case, which is so confusing when people encounter the opposite. When they encounter like the Bill Cosbys of the world, or the Scott Petersons, or um, there's any of more of like the charismatic, likable, abusive people out there. Okay, somebody, Deanna, had asked, how do you know that you're making the right decision to leave? Boy, that's a good question. I think mm, there's so many factors at play, and it's not always easy for a person, I think, as we all know, to leave. So I think it depends on where kind of a person is, like a lot of the other different factors at play. I think in a nutshell, it boils down to, if you're not being treated with dignity and respect, and you've tried to work through things as if they were a communication issue, and this person has shown you that they're not changing, and you're feeling, if you're feeling exhausted, ground down, if you're being abused, used, exploited, or neglected, and this doesn't seem that there's no end in sight, and they're not changing, they're not being accountable for their behavior, they're not changing their behavior, then at that point I would say that's a good decision to leave. But like somebody else had mentioned in the live stream, like, until we can figure out, um, really work on our standards and our boundaries and our vulnerabilities, like, how did this person get into our life? Kind of what pieces of the puzzle were we missing, that they were able to slide under our radar and get into our life? Until we can get those things answered, which oftentimes takes a while, then the odds of us running into another problematic person is pretty high. Because if we're continually falling for like the love bombing and the attention and the affection and all of that, then the next person that comes along, there's a solid chance we're going to fall for that. So I encourage for a person, if they're going to leave, to bench yourself, take a time out for at least a year, at least, and really read up on boundaries and, um, get familiar with how does it feel? How do you feel when you're in a problematic situation? How do you feel when you're in a healthy situation? What are some criteria for what's a healthy situation for you? What are some criteria for what is a deal breaker situation for you? To really get to know yourself well enough to where, um, you know, you can trust yourself to be able to steer clear. Like if you get into it, because sometimes we all get caught up in it. I mean, I still get caught up in these kinds of dynamics with some people. It's You might not be able to at least right away because it's learning a new skill. It's like learning how to ride a bike. Like you're going to fall a few times before you really get it down. It's not so much about avoiding it 100%. It's more about when you do spot it, to be able to respond accordingly. And I think you'll find that over time, your response time for this becomes better and better. Because it's learning something new, and it's really difficult to see a situation clearly when we have that emotional investment in it. That's another one of the main reasons I'm a huge fan of meetup.com, because it's a safer way to practice these new skills of like boundaries and standards and examining, kind of people watching. And you're practicing all of this with new people, not with your friends because you already know your friends, with strangers. You're practicing this stuff with strangers. This is a great way to kind of tell, okay, am I learning these lessons? Am I able to apply it? Am I kind of getting this new skill set down before you jump back into dating? Because the stronger the emotional investment a person has in something, the less clearly they're going to see a situation. So it's so much easier to see this kind of stuff in a quote unquote friend or acquaintance than it is in somebody that we are romantically interested in. And if you do start dating again, to go really slow and to realize to set the pace of that relationship. So, I'm a big fan, like, wait as long as you can to have sex, you know, to just take things slow, to take that intimate, like that getting to know you phase slow, because everybody looks really good the first 30 to 90 days. And then the truth of who they come out, who they are, kind of surfaces over time. It's just like a job interview or anything else. So it's a lot easier to leave before we get incredibly bonded to somebody. Oh, very cool. New Chris says, "Hey, meetups. I'm flying to New York for a joint birthday tomorrow, and I'm going to do some random meetups over the weekend. I'm flying from the UK, so very low stakes. I like it. Very, very cool." So I hope you have fun with that. Jessica says, "How do you clean up your reputation after it's been damaged by a smear campaign?" I think the only way to really kind of clean up your reputation is by not focusing on it. And it's instead focusing on your character. So character is more of who you are. Reputation is more of what other people think you are. And reputations can be damaged in many, many different ways. So it's really going to be difficult to get through to people that have been manipulated by an emotional manipulator and to set them straight. So I think, if they bring anything up to you, you can just say, "Oh, I'm sure. Like, I'm sure you guys have heard a lot of garbage about me." Realize that there's two sides to every story and that most everything that you've heard has been a lie. And then let them know, like, don't even pay attention. Don't pay attention to what the other person says, and don't pay attention to what I do, what I say. Don't pay attention to what either of us say. Watch what I do, because anybody that's going to know you for any length of time is going to know, like, okay, yeah, this person's got pretty in there. They pay me back if they owe me money. They show up when they say they're going to show up. They do what they say they're going to do. You know, they're responsible. They own their behavior. If they do something wrong, they admit to it. You can tell that they're taking action to not have it happen again, you know. So that's what I would tell people. Like, don't focus on what anybody says, focus on what I do. Yep. Deborah says, good advice. Actions speak best. Yeah. Everything else is just fluff. Everything else is talk. And talk isn't just cheap, it's free. And emotional manipulators, oftentimes, that's their only tool is talk. You know, it's just words. And they think that they can really alter reality. And sometimes they can with other people, with doing a smear campaign, that they just create their own reality by speaking it. If they say that they're the best, then that somehow means they're the best. If they say that they didn't cheat, then that means that they didn't cheat. If they say that, you know, like whatever, that it means what they say, and they get so offended if you don't believe them, and you're like, okay, it's actions, it's not words, because in their screwed up reality, it is all about words. It's like a little kid. It's like a little kid who hides behind a curtain, and and like you can see their feet sticking out from under the curtain, right? But in their mind, because they can't see you, you can't see them. That's how it is with a narcissist. Like, what I say is the truth. It doesn't matter if you can see what's really going on, you know? Or if they like, it's this really immature, screwy logic. Allie says, Dana, could you explain why we shouldn't look a narcissist in the eyes? I I have no idea why you wouldn't. Probably because that would really make them. I guess if a person, let's just back this up a little bit. If we're talking about being confrontational with the person who's in that fight mode, if a person's already feeling incredibly aggressive. So when you see a narcissist, people talk all the time like their eyes go black, right? What you're seeing is an adrenaline response. So this happens to all of us. Your pupils are going to expand. And so your eyes are going to look really, really dark. That's the sign of a person that's about to attack. And so I would imagine maybe confronting a person directly when they're already in a fight mode is not going to help things at all. But that would be the only reason I could think of. I mean, you guys, narcissists are people. Like, don't give them any more power. They're not these, these, they're not powerful creatures. They're pathetic, pitiful creatures. Okay. I'm not saying to have pity on them. I'm just saying, like, don't make them into this supernatural, powerful, they've got all this power over you. They don't. It's like seeing the wizard behind the curtain. You have the power. You have your power. You were manipulated out of it. But now that you know what's going on, now that you know the rules of the game, and that you've been dealing with a manipulative person, you can get your power back. Missouri Cowboy says, try out staring a narcissist. They have superpowers and being able to stare forever without blinking. Yeah. And it may my guess would be that it also has something to do with adrenaline. Like, it's about just winning. So again, they're kind of back in that fight mode of, it's that competitive nature. Allie says, thank you, Dana. I'm dealing with a malignant one at a job. Ugh, yeah. Those can be really difficult, but so much of it just goes down to like developing a strategy, trying to steer clear as much as possible, really towing the line, getting other witnesses to your reality. So, not having private discussions in an office, making sure it's in front of the secretary, it's in front of some, other coworkers, so other people have a witness to what's going on. ideally saying things through email, some sort of like verbal, written paper trail kind of a thing. Missouri Cowboy says they're not demons, just pitiful creatures. Ew. Yeah. Yeah. And it's just sort of like if you guys remember the old horror movie Nightmare on Elm Street with Freddy Krueger, and he used to run around and he would appear in people's dreams and he would terrorize them. And the only way that he was able to actually hurt anybody is they had to fall asleep and they had to be afraid. So he fed on their fear. So I think it's very much, there's a lot of similarity there. So like you've got to somehow slip into their world, right? Where now the rules, they're in charge of this kind of upside down scary world, and you've got to be afraid. And that was kind of the one thing, like how did they beat Freddy Krueger? They reclaimed their power and they finally stood up to him and they're like, you know what, I take back all of the power I ever gave you. You don't scare me, you're nothing. And that was when Freddy Krueger would start to kind of recoil and withdraw. Now, I'm not recommending that you flat out tell a narcissist that, because that can go really, they can become very dangerous. But I am saying to tell yourself that and to realize you might be really terrified. There are some really scary people out there that have absolutely no conscience whatsoever, you know, but there's things that you can do. You can get out of there. You can move, you can change, you can go to a domestic violence shelter. Like there's things that you can do that you might be afraid, but you can still reclaim your power and control and you can get yourself the heck out of this situation. Yeah, Lilith says, Dana, that's perfect. Yeah, you tell yourself that. Yep. Sad little game. Sad little man or woman, pathetic. It's nothing. Like you don't control me. I control me. I take back my power and control. Once you see the game changes completely. It's all the beauty of going gray rock. It's the beauty of going no contact. It's, you know, the ball is more in your court. Shay says, yeah, they look pretty silly once you really see it. For real. And silly and exhausting. You just think, my God, I don't even understand. Like for me to just live a life, I think for most of us, right? To just live a normal life is exhausting, let alone a double life, let alone a life of like trying to stalk or terrorize somebody else. Like that requires so much energy. And when you see it and you make that shift to seeing it from like something scary to something just outright pathetic, it can be a lot easier to just disengage. Like you're seriously dealing with a bully, and an elementary school emotional maturity type bully at that. Kevin says, I'm not afraid of them. I do question the presence of evil though. Oh yeah, evil behavior, you know? And I guess if you think about behavior makes a person, then yeah. I don't know if I believe in evil in terms of like, supernatural forces. I think normal everyday evil is enough. Like that's enough of a problem. And yeah, their behavior from many of them is flat out evil. But the evil, there's a lot of talk in different kind of spiritual texts about evil and about goodness. And evil, they talk about the devil. The devil is the author of confusion. The devil, it's the prince of darkness, manipulative. Oh God, kitty cat. cat just like freaked out. Um, they, sinister, the devil comes dressed as everything that you want kind of things. And there's, there's a lot of parallels though. If you look at that as more metaphorical, that's exactly, you're describing that kind of manipulative, abusive behavior. It is confusion. It preys on a person's vulnerabilities. It comes dressed as everything they want. That's how a person's vulnerabilities are manipulated. So, and a person's vulnerabilities tend to be, fear, lust, anger, greed, sympathy. Those kinds of things are a person's vulnerabilities. And the opposite of that, so like that good energy, if you're again talking about kind of Christianity, like with God, talks about, it's, the word is light, there's clarity, there's, um it's free from confusion. It's the opposite of that. It's goodness, it's empowering, it's confidence, it's kind of it's just everything kind of positive and nourishing and supportive. And so that really is, how do you beat evil is with good. It's with the opposite of that. What exists in darkness, you bring light to it. You bring that clarity to it. You see things clearly. You know, the devil tries to exploit a person's vulnerabilities and they come dressed as everything that you want. How you bring clarity to that is to be aware of, like, what are your vulnerabilities at this stage in your life, and knowing that they're going to be different in different stages of your life. It's um, addressing those vulnerabilities. It's of being is seeing everything that you want and still being in touch enough with yourself to realize what's healthy and what's a problem, and then to walk away, even if the devil, or that shiny thing comes as this really great paying job, but that you have to sell out your morality for it, or this amazing person that's so charming and whatnot. But you're like, man, I feel like I'm selling my soul if I go this route. I have to sacrifice my dignity to stay in this relationship. Like, then that's a problem. So Maria says, yes, knowing what our current vulnerabilities are really takes so much self awareness and no shame about what they could be. It's huge. Yeah, absolutely. And it's really difficult for us to get real with ourselves because so many, again, the stuff's not taught. And even though we're talking about it now, it's really difficult to examine these dark parts of ourselves, of what our vulnerabilities are, kind of what traumatic stuff might have happened, all of these unexamined parts, because so many of us have spent our whole life trying to run from them. And what does running look like? It looks like all kinds of maladaptive ways of coping. It's drugs, it's alcohol, it's food, it's money, it's sex, it's um it's just, it's running, it's running, it's running, it's running. And so much of this stuff is so normalized with culture. Like, it's not a big deal for people to have a lot of sex anymore with different partners, or it's not a big deal for a person to have $40,000 in credit card debt, or it's not a big deal for a person to have, here in the United States, like a 3,000 square foot house and it's filled to the brim with everything new. And unfortunately, and what also is normal, it's normal for a person to be depressed and to be anxious and have trouble sleeping and to feel alone, and all of this stuff has become normal, and none of it's normal. Your depression, your anxiety, it's not just a chemical imbalance, like there's more going on there. And we've gotten to this place where we so separated these the the issues that we have We're treating them like the issue instead of realizing that they're a symptom of a larger issue. And when we can address that larger issue, then those symptoms, the symptoms of depression and of anxiety and of insomnia and of alcoholism and of all these other things, they start to resolve themselves. Because it's not, the way, it's not that problems are the problem, it's how we cope with them that's the problem. So, oh, good point, Missouri. Thank you for the live stream donation. Missouri Cowboy says, "Who needs demons when men do enough evil on their own?" So true. So true. Human beings, it's amazing the stuff that we can do. And it's so important that we're just aware of how this stuff goes down within other people and within ourselves so we can break the cycle. Bear, hello. He says, "Hello, everybody." Yeah, Kevin says, "Dana, this is why I'm not afraid of them. Good will always win in the end." Yeah, I really feel like it's the larger picture of it all, you know? Like so many times we need the beauty of trauma like this is it's very uniting. It bonds other people that go through it. And so many survivors of anything traumatic are able to bond. They're able to set aside their differences and come together. And I don't think there is a more unifying force out there than trauma. You look at whether 9/11 or Hurricane Irma, or narcissistic abuse or what have you. It really does serve to unify people. And when that happens, also important conversations it opens the doors for important conversations to start happening. So I don't know. It's, I really feel like that this whole kind of wave that we're on with paying attention to our emotions and our intuition and, you know, learning to reconnect with that, and maybe not even to reconnect with it, but learning to connect with it for the first time ever, that's just kind of this next wave of evolution for humanity, you know? I mean, before, you think 100 years ago, our grandparents or our great grandparents, they didn't have the luxury of connecting to like their inner wisdom. It was about survival. You grew up on a farm, you were put to work by the time you could start walking. And life was hard and life was about survival. And now we've gotten to this point where it's sort of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like once those basic needs start getting met, then a person starts moving up that ladder towards self-actualization. And we're at that place now where I just think this is becoming more and more of an issue that people are realizing this is a problem. So it's bringing a lot of people together and bringing about a lot of awareness that I don't think would have happened in any other way. And Kenzie saying, "My first husband had a prison mentality. He was on drugs, but he was abusive. Second husband was a sober, covert abuser." And so, yes, you bring up a really great point. I see this with a lot of people. I've done it too, is where if a person is hurt by a certain type of person. So let's say for example, you're talking about your first husband, prison mentality, he was on drugs. So he was overtly abusive, exploitative, and he was an addict, right? Or at least a substance abuser. Second guy, so what most people tend to do is they experience something painful and then they go and they're like, "You know what? I never want anything to do with somebody like that again." And so then they run oftentimes to the exact opposite. But the problem is the exact opposite of an overt abuser tends to be a covert abuser. And so if they go from that overt abuser who was maybe very selfish, very entitled, very unaffectionate, just kind of, self-absorbed, difficult, you know, cold kind of person, then they're incredibly vulnerable and really primed for more of that covert abuser, especially for like a love bombing covert abuser. And so all of that love bombing is coming across, instead of as problematic, it's coming across as ideal. Boy, this new person, it's so seems to just really love me so they seem so certain that I'm the one for them. They're coming on so fast and furious. They're in hot pursuit. Uh, they're writing poetry. They're sending me videos. They're sending me songs. They're making me their whole world. And if the former partner was overtly abusive, it can just it that love bombing can just feel like the warm maple syrup on the pancakes of your soul. Like it just feels so good if we're not aware that that's a huge red flag. And so then people tend to get tangled up with that kind of person, and then they often will get out of that relationship, and then they're really confused. And they're like, "Well, now I don't know how to keep myself safe. I know that I need to be aware of like controlling, jealous, possessive, angry, abusive people, but now I'm also supposed to avoid Prince Charming. What does that leave me with?" And so then they just stop dating altogether. Or they might decide, "You know what? I feel safer with an overt abuser because I'd rather deal with the snake on the street than the snake in the grass." Because it's incredibly traumatizing to realize that you've gotten bit by a snake in the grass that you just didn't even see coming. And so there's kind of like this weird level of comfort that a lot of people have with kind of overt abuse after they've encountered that covert abuser. And and then that, kind of that going back and forth. I should draw. I was thinking today, I'm like, I should really draw out a map, like kind of as just, kind of tongue in cheek, I guess would be the way to describe it, like a map to healing and all of these things to kind of watch out for, because then you've got all this well-intended bad advice. So after a person gets out of this relationship with the covert abuser and they're terrified, they often hear from friends and family and therapists, "Well, not all women are like that, or not all men are like that, and to get back out there, and it was a fluke thing, and don't let this sour your view on love." And then they start pushing all of this garbage at them of love like your heart's never been hurt before. And then of course the person that's been abused is like, "What's wrong with me? I don't trust anybody. I'm terrified of getting hurt again. I just want to stay at home alone and I feel broken." And yes, granted, a lot of that's PTSD type symptoms, and a lot of that does tend to kind of resolve on its own over time. But what's really happening is they're having this huge awakening and they don't realize it. And other people around them that haven't been through this don't realize it either. And so because they feel like I'm just losing my mind, like, I just have PTSD, or I just feel like I'm going crazy. They're not, and they're second guessing themselves because they're like, "Dana," I hear this all the time, like, "Dana, what's wrong with me? I see red flags in everybody. I'm paranoid. I'm just so paranoid. I'm so scared. I'm dating this new person. And I'm seeing all these red flags. I don't want to let like a good person go because I'm scared, or because I have issues." That's what they're telling themselves. And the reality is, what's really happening is that they're awake to this stuff, and they're aware of problematic behavior that they've never been aware of before. And then they're like, "But I see it around everywhere around me." And it's like, yes, because it's everywhere around you. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just out there. So this is where it goes back to learning to be in tune enough with yourself to realize 10% of the people out there in the world are are really fantastic people. They're worth their weight in gold. They're what will keep your faith in humanity. The other 10% should probably be in jail. The other 80% are somewhere in between. And of that top 10% of people out there that are just awesome, really probably about 1% of those people are your people. They're the ones that are going to like both football and guitar. Like they're going to be your people. And it's so difficult if it's a shift for us to make because so many of us just think that we tend to have been so agreeable and so people pleasing. We just think that everybody is our people and everybody's not your people. And so there's a lot of rude awakenings when it comes to stuff like this. Now, just because a person's not your people doesn't make them necessarily bad. Sometimes they're just, not your people. So it's not so much with that kind of stuff. It's not about judgment, but it's about discernment. And it's about knowing yourself well enough to figure out what kind of soil you need to grow. Oh, that's so true. Elizabeth says, "Yeah, I used to think I could click with anyone if I worked hard enough at it." Yeah, that's boy, I think you nailed it. I think so many of us have felt that way of like if we can just kind of ingratiate ourselves enough to another person, if we can turn ourselves into an emotional pretzel and walk on enough eggshells and people please enough and just be give them second and 20-second and 220-second chances and be kind and patient and loving and understanding and just be there for them whenever they need us. If we can just make our lives all about them, then eventually we can win them over. And that somehow means that they are our people. And and what's sad too about that is then we often think, oh, good, this is a good thing, right? Like we've done a good thing. We've somehow won them over, but really we've lost because you've lost yourself in the process. And it goes back to that whole being choosy versus being chosen. It's just so many of these things are just new mindsets that we have to cultivate because so many of us are like, I don't know life any other way. All I know is how to walk on eggshells and just go with the flow. And I've been so agreeable that I've lost what's important to me. I don't understand my wants and my needs. I don't understand like my what I value. I don't have deal breakers. I've been so focused on being agreeable that I've made my whole life about everybody else. It's really twisted. Kevin says if we don't people please, we stick out like a sore thumb. In most families, that's what the black sheep is, right? It's that person that either speaks their mind or doesn't beat the drum of everybody else in the family. And oftentimes we're the black sheep because, especially when we start to wake up to this stuff and, we're like, no, geez, dad yells at me every time I go home and I'm tired of it. So I'm going to quit going home. And then all of a sudden we're cruel, unreasonable, selfish, uncompassionate, vindictive for not wanting to be abused. It's insanity. And so trying to explain this to other people that are still operating from that mindset of families forever and forgive and forget. And you just, you know, like it's dad had a bad childhood. You just have to learn to walk on eggshells. Like if they're still operating from that mentality, they're not going to get it. And so a lot of this stuff too is kind of going back to kind of what Kevin was saying about, we're talking about good and evil. If you back up from that even a little bit more and you think about this kind of stuff in terms of energy, because really that's what it is. Okay. It's energy and awareness and frequency. It's probably a better way to say it. If a person is on a certain, if they're on, you know, 9:50 a.m. and you're on 102.5 FM, you're not going to hear each other. And when people start waking up to this kind of stuff, they start changing their frequency. And in turn, like you really start changing kind of who is attracted to you to some degree, because sometimes it's a wild card. Like we all attract a wide range of people, but it's more about who we're attracted to and how long we keep those other people in our lives. But you start to attract people that are more on your same frequency. And unfortunately, oftentimes what happens is everybody else that used to be on your frequency is now no longer on it. This happens throughout a person's life. It's a very normal thing. And speaking of which, we're going to discuss this whole thing of like endings and necessary endings. That's the book for the book club, which is next Thursday. So um, definitely be on there. This is probably one of my favorite books we've read this year for book club. Fantastic. But people grow and change. So just sort of like when you were in, I don't know, high school and you went, or maybe college is a better example. When you're in college, everybody kind of bonded together based on common interests, right? Or based on potential. You know, if you were in going pre-med, other people were going pre-med, and you were kind of in the same cohort of type people. But then the real world happens, right? You graduate, or you graduate from high school, then the real world happens, whatever it is, then the real world happens. And then people, because we all know that, right? And then like you go back to a high school reunion or whatever, and you see people, or a college reunion, and you're like, nope, some people haven't changed a bit. Like they're the exact same way that they were in high school. And you realize I have nothing in common with this person. Like they might have been a really good friend 15 years ago, but they're still out getting drunk and they still live in the same hometown and they're still, doing the same thing. And you've since moved on and are doing totally different stuff. And it's just part of life. Like as you grow and change, so does your outer circle, so does your inner circle. Like who you spend time with is also going to change. And your inner circle is also going to be, it's going to be a reflection of kind of who you are at this stage in your life. And so it's a really good idea to think about that, kind of who is in your inner circle. And is this an accurate reflection of kind of where you're at in your life? Because so many people tend to have people in their inner circle based on like nostalgia or obligation. Like, well, we were really great friends in 5th grade and or in middle school. And so we've just have been quote unquote best friends for 30 years. But then when it really comes down to it, it's like, you know what? Actually, I don't even like this person. We argue about everything. We have nothing in common. They're bitter, they're jaded, they're what have you. But they've been my best friend for 30 years. So they still have a spot in the inner circle. And maybe the reality is maybe they need to be moved like to kind of one ring out to being more of like an acquaintance, right? Or maybe just a friend that you see every now and again, or what have you. No right or wrong answer to this or way to approach it. It's knowing yourself well enough to know kind of why you're doing what you're doing and who's got those coveted spots in your inner circle. That's a big thing. And to be continually kind of examining that and updating that. Banaz says, I feel so much shame and guilt about my life so far. I can't let go of anger and I'm easily traumatized. I would encourage you to, there's some really great books out there on, well, okay, if you're interested in books at all, books on what's called DBT therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy. And it's all about mindfulness and getting in tune with your emotions. And it's, I wish this stuff was taught in like elementary school because it's fantastic. So that might be worth some reading. There's probably videos on YouTube about it too, now that I'm thinking of it. But checking that out. And then let's see. What is the other book? Oh, from CPTSD, From Surviving to Thriving by Pete Walker is another really great book worth checking out. That talks a lot about kind of processing different emotions and moving forward into healing. But shame, having guilt, having regret, having remorse, depression, anxiety, very, very common if a person's either grown up in abuse or they've later been in abusive relationships with people. And especially if it's taken them, you know, years to leave, or they kind of realize, wow, my life would have taken a very different path had I known a lot of this stuff sooner. And then they start to there's just this feeling of like, oh my gosh, I've somehow missed the boat, or I've my life is so far off track. And it's I think if we can look at light, life is about growth. And there's kind of all of these different lives that are there. There's the life that we feel that we should be living. There's the life that other people feel we should be living. There's the life that we are living. And then there's the life that's trying to live through us. And that last one, that life that is trying to live through you, is the one that I think is most significant. But it's the one that we don't pay attention to because it's not seen as valid by a lot of families or cultures or religions or us, even, for a wide variety of reasons. But paying attention to, because the thing is, your past has brought you to this moment today. And I guess I personally, I don't really believe, I think, we did the best we could with what we knew. And when we know better, then we can do better. So there's a lot of lessons that we all learned the hard way. And a lot of this stuff is such a huge wake up call for us in so many different ways. And whenever we have a wake up call or an aha moment of any kind, I think pretty much, actually, now that I'm thinking about it out loud, like any aha moment that happens tends to come with pain and regret of, why didn't I know this sooner? People graduate from college and they studied to become an engineer because their father told them that they needed to become an engineer, or some guidance counselor in high school told them that they should become an engineer, but they really wanted to be a comedian or something radically, or an artist or a doctor or a poet. And they were somehow talked out of that. And so now they realize, oh my gosh, like that, I've been an engineer now for 15 years and I absolutely hate it, but I feel like I can't leave. I've got a wife and I've got kids and bills and responsibilities. And like, if I had known earlier that I was so far off track, like, you know what I mean? So there's always this element of, if I only knew then what I know now, no matter what it is, with money, with kids, with family, with boundaries, with dating, with jobs, religion, like any aspect of your life. I think everybody tends to feel like that. And, but let's talk for a second about that life that's trying to live through you, because frankly, I think all of our life experiences boils down to that. And that is it's really getting into that, getting in tune with your authentic self and then being that. Get That's really kind of what it is figuring out who are you, and then having the courage to be that person. And you can tell that life that's trying to live through you, it starts off as a whisper at first, or maybe it starts off as a feeling. Like if you really have this pull of, man, you just really love poetry or reading, and you're like, man, I would love to be a writer, but you don't even entertain the idea. But yet you find yourself, you're looking up, like, okay, when's the next poetry reading going to be? Or when is the next writer's workshop going to be? And you kind of keep flirting with this idea of what would this be like? And this is kind of this fantasy. So that starts from that whisper. It starts, it's that feeling that it's pulling you. You're so interested in it. When you're doing it, you tend to lose track of time. You would do it for free if you could. It's that level of interest, like it's pulling you. It's what you're reading or researching or Googling in your spare time, that kind of a thing. And when you do it, you lose track of time, you feel really alive. It's exciting to kind of entertain that pull and follow that, and see, okay, what would this look like? Can I take a writing workshop? Can I join some online groups for writers? Can I really just see, like, what is this life really like? What is the reality of this life like? Because oftentimes it's very different than the fantasy. But to kind of follow those things that really pull at you. And same thing with kids, right? So with kids, so much of it, so many of us, because a lot of it's just generational thing. For so many of us, we grew up in a home where there are these expectations. This is these are There's kind of this unspoken thing, right? Like these are the expected professions for you. Maybe that's based on your culture or your nationality or your religion or your gender or your parents' kind of socioeconomic status or what have you. But most families have this kind of unspoken understanding of this is the menu of professions and friends and cars and neighborhoods that these are the expectations we have of you, and these are the things that we expect you to not do. We all have it, so it's worth examining. And then to kind of examine, like, where did I get these different beliefs from, and what's really pulling at me? Like, what do I really want to go and explore? And then to start doing that, because you know life's too short to not be yourself. Like, the world needs people that show up and are their authentic selves, you know? Like, everybody gets so concerned about making a bunch of money or the stuff, and the stuff is such a distraction. It really, really is. I don't know. To me, it's all about kind of playing for the long game. Yeah, that's a good point. Maria says, coming out of denial was scary. Admitting my childhood and parents were really terrible. I've wasted years with friends and love relationships that sucked, and waking up to the truth was so very scary. Yeah, it totally it totally is, and it can really send a person almost into this, like, psychological or emotional collapse when they are fully awake to it. Because it's just that crushing amount of shame and regret and anger and, "Oh my god, what have I done?" kind of a thing, and I think that's why so many people stay asleep. Sort of like the Matrix. Like, do you wanna know what's really going on, or do you wanna take the what is it? The red pill and wake up to it, or do you wanna take the blue pill and go back to sleep? And so many people would rather just be like, "I just wanna go back to sleep, man." Like, it's way too much stuff. Reality is harsh, and it's ugly, and there's a lot of stuff to sort through, and it can be really intense for a lot of people. This is another one of the many reasons I don't like the media, is the media really sells this image that other people have it all figured out. And I'm glad, and granted, a lot of our TV and movies have gotten better about this. You look at the TV from, I don't know, it was like the 50s and 60s, like Leave It to Beaver and um, oh, Brady Bunch and stuff like this, where everything, it was, I mean, I liked it because it was good, clean TV, but it also showed families that really didn't have any serious problems. And so when other people had serious problems, it really felt like then it's just us, because so much of what you saw in movies and in TV was this perfect family, this perfect life, and perfect wife, perfect husband, perfect career, perfect house, perfect kids. And it's not reality. And because the stuff's not talked about, people don't realize that it's not just them, you know? Well, good. Thanks, Larry. Larry says, Dana, you're making it plain tonight. Thank you. Well, good deal. That's the goal. People are talking about tiny homes on here. It's funny. That's uh, been something that's really been on my radar for a while now, for like 7 years, is not necessarily like a tiny home. Like, I don't want to try to live in a dollhouse. Like, it makes my palms sweat even thinking about it. That's too small. That's too small. I need to be able to spin around in my kitchen or in my bathroom and just one full loop with my arms open and not touch anything. That's it. So, um but yeah, I could totally see myself exploring small homes. Not tiny, but maybe small. I think it'd be fun. I think it'd be really here's I think I've talked about this before. I think it would be so much fun if time and money were no object, okay, to go to some local universities and to get the both the art and the architecture students there involved and have them come up with like different floor plans and just kind of concepts for the house, and then kind of give them different criteria and say, okay, these are some of the features that I want to experiment with and see what they come up with. I think it would be so much fun all the way around. The kids could use it for like their portfolio. They could get to experiment and play and actually build something that's going to come to fruition. And I don't know. I just think it'd be fun to just be creative like that. So we'll see. And I think it would be a win for society to be able to kind of create houses that are affordable and portable. And Missouri Cowboy's talking about his dream. He says, yeah, society seems so caught up in acquiring stuff and things. He said, I did too. So I'm not judging. I think I may feel it's odd in comparison to some of the huge homes I've experienced. I want to feel safe and not burdened by excessive stuff and things. Yeah, I get it. I mean, that was one of my big wake ups is when I got divorced. I just really we were living in this huge house in Las Vegas, which is like so not my city at all. And I just realized I'm like, this, how did I get here? Like none of this life feels like my own. And just sitting alone in this like 3,400 square foot house, just feeling totally lost. Like I don't even know whose life I'm living, but this is not mine. And slowly began getting rid of like more and more and more stuff. Every breakup along the way, every move I made, every kind of shedding of that skin, I lost so much more stuff out of my life. Some of it I was okay with leaving, and a lot of it I was not okay with that I just ended up losing anyhow for a wide variety of reasons. But it was very powerful. It really kind of drove the point home of like what do you really need and what do you really want? And I remember, and I still have these moments where I have to laugh at myself. Like I'll go through my closet or I'll pack for a trip and I'll start. It's like in my closet, I have all these clothes, not so much anymore, but I used to have all these clothes that were like very small, not the size that I am today, not the size that I've been in the past year. Like old clothes. They weren't even in style, not even close to being in style. They didn't fit. They weren't comfortable to begin with. I had, you know, like button down shirts. That's not flattering on me. I don't like them. I don't like anything. I don't like shirts with collars. Like there's just so many things where, realizing who like who do I think I am when I go shopping? It's just really weird. And getting rid of a lot of this stuff and donating it and continually, and I do that. It's weird. It's interesting too because I do the same thing when I pack. I tend to pack clothes based on like offhand chances of I don't even freaking know. Like I'm totally delusional when I pack. I will pack clothes. Okay, if I'm really gonna get dressed up and go out, like I don't get dressed up and go out. I have not dressed up and gone out and I don't even know how long. I don't want to. Like, but I would bring like pack all these clothes or like workout clothes. Like I don't work out on a regular basis. But somehow when I travel, I think I'm gonna go hit the gym and then go out to like martini bars. Like I'm packing for a life that I don't even have. It's just weird. So just getting real with myself and with ourselves. And so when I've talked about this all the time, like that whole concept of rating things on a scale, like learning to get in tune with how you feel about different things and kind of figuring out like who are you? Who are you? Not who you feel that you should be, not who other people feel you should be, maybe not even who you are today, but who is that deeper self that's trying to come through, listening to that your inner being and how it speaks to you. It tends to really truly come across like when people talk about having an inner child, it tends to really come across like that. It tends to come across as excitement and enthusiasm and, like a little kid, like you just get lost in these and exploring new things or, thinking about what clothes do you wear that you enjoy wearing? What clothes do you wear that excite you? What type of hobbies make you feel that same way that you can just get lost in for hours or that excite you or that you look forward to doing or that you find yourself continually Googling? If you're finding yourself continually Googling like Italian language courses, maybe it's time to go take some Italian language courses and explore that. And, you know, oh, I lost my train of thought from before. I just realized what I was trying to say before. But with the kids, so our parents, it was very much kind of living this life of expectation because that's how they were raised, and then, but for us to kind of break that cycle and realize that it's not about our children kind of living our unfulfilled dreams. It's about having our children or our grandchildren or the next generation to connect with themselves and to figure out who they are and what they want to be. And that's kind of this next wave of parenting, is realizing that children are people too, and getting the child to focus, like, hey, what are they curious about? What are they excited about? What's calling to them? And getting rid of these menus that we were presented with, of like, you hadn't have any career in column A and any relationship in column B, but nothing on the lunch menu, only on the dinner menu, like getting rid of that. And with kids, seeing what sparks their interest, and then kind of exploring that with them. If you've got a kid who's really into Legos, you know, instead of just being like, you don't have time to play, you need to, or you should be doing something else, right? Like when I was a kid, when I was your age, we played baseball outside until it got dark, and then expecting that your child does the same. If your kid's really into Legos and they're not into sports, then to kind of be like, okay, let's explore. Let's go to some Lego conventions. Let's build some stuff. Like, what's interesting about Legos to you? And putting aside our own feelings of like what they should be, or people, if a parent's like, well, I don't get it. Like, I was really into baseball, so I don't understand why my kid likes to read or likes chess club. So because we're not interested in it, then we don't want our kid to be interested in it, because then that means then we've got to have spend time pretending to be interested in it, and kind of like losing that mentality and realizing it's so cool. Because when you have this child, it's this life that has come into the world through you, and even though it's genetically a part of you, like, they're their own being. And so it's part of like that gift of watching a child grow, is figuring out, okay, who are they going to be? Who are they? And kind of letting them, I mean, guiding them, but at the same time, like letting their inner self reveal itself. Like, it's cool. It's cool to watch a kid kind of come into their own. Kenzie says, yes, thank you. Let the kid love Legos. Got a lot of Lego lovers in the crowd tonight. Yeah. Yeah, Maria says, yeah, if we've gone from being parent-centered parenting to child-centered parenting, and this has been a huge change. Yeah. It's interesting to kids, they're really in tune with so much. And it's amazing. Like, if we can just let them tell us kind of who they are, and let them and of course they're kids, right? So they're going to change. So one year they might be super into baseball, and then the next year they're not. The next year they're really into Legos, or the next year they're really into acting classes, or kind of what have you. But it's fun. Postmodern says, yeah, children are people too. Yeah, they are. And it's hard. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to let other people just be themselves like that, especially children. So every parent, I think, has hopes and dreams and wishes and concerns and fears about their child, and that's all totally normal. It's hard to watch them struggle, and to watch them make mistakes, and to kind of come into their own. Lilith says, I'm getting rid of everything that doesn't make me feel happy. If you're familiar at all with my videos, there's a concept I refer to as kind of the 9-10 concept or thinking about items on a scale. And it's a lot easier if you do this with things that you're not emotionally invested in. So it might be really difficult to dive right into, friendships or relationships. But so to start with something easy, maybe even it might even be difficult to start with your closet, frankly, because a lot of people, myself included, have a lot of emotional issues attached to clothing. It's weird. But so maybe start with something like your kitchen or a bookcase or your junk drawer. Maybe that's even a good one. So to get some sort of bearing of on an emotional scale of like 0 being ice cold, 5 being lukewarm, and 10 being like, that's it. That juices you, man, that's where it's at. In to start ranking items. So I commonly use these ink pens. There's just Pilot ink pens. They're ink pens. So they're nothing special about them really, but I love them. I love them. These are like a 9 or a 10 for me. And regular ballpoint pens like this are like nails on a chalkboard. They are probably like a 2 or a 3. I will use them if there's nothing else, but I really don't like them. Um, and that might sound kind of diva, right? But it's just knowing these little quirks about yourself. Like I really enjoy writing with these pens. So I have a lot of these pens. I don't have very many ballpoint pens floating around the house because I just really don't like them. I don't know why. Doesn't really matter. I don't like them. So 9 or a 10. Um this lip balm. It's menthol, mint, um, body shop, lip balm. Love it. Not tested on animals. Love the flavor of it. I love it. Does an amazing job of like hydrating my lips. This is a 9 or a 10. Um this pad of paper that I came across the other day, I really like this for doing certain types of writing. The paper is really thick and it's great for the ink pens that I like so much. So that's a 9 or a 10. Uh let's see. I really like this hanging thing behind me with the different words. I got that from a gal off of Etsy. Love that. 9 or a 10. Um, cha cha cha. Trying to think what else is near me that I can grab. I'd say this microphone is like a 9 or a 10. It works pretty good, and I really, I really like it. Let's see other things. Okay, things that I don't like. And again, this sounds really diva, but if you're going to spend money on stuff, you might as well spend money on stuff that you really like. For the longest time, I would buy the cheapest sheets that I could get at the store, and they are very rough. And it's like sleeping on sandpaper. And but I just, I just thought sheets are sheets. Like, get over it, right? And it's obviously I can get over it and I can sleep on any bedding out there. But I thought, Dana, why not spend the extra, whatever it is, like $30 or $40 and really get a sheet set that you really, really like? And so I did, made that shift to doing that. Probably another more common daily example is with coffee and with bread. And I used to buy the cheapest coffee and the cheapest bread at the grocery store. And that was one of the things that I stopped doing when my relationship with Jack ended, because that was one of those early wake up calls of I'm settling for good enough. I know something's wrong, but I feel like I'm being selfish or greedy or entitled or demanding or too diva by expecting quality in my life. So realizing, yeah, you know what? And it seriously would cause me so much anxiety to go to the grocery store. Like, the mental anguish that was involved between the cheap coffee and the coffee that was, like, 3 or $4 more. It was not even in the ballpark of reasonable. And I remember thinking, like, "I wonder what other people must be thinking about me right now," because I've been standing in the coffee aisle for a very long time, holding 2 different bags of coffee and, like, probably sweating. I it was so stressful for me. I felt so guilty and, like, I don't like, who do you think you are buying the coffee that you really like, you know? Same thing with bread and having to really, like, shift my mindset about that of, "Dana, you know, it's okay to eat good bread. It doesn't mean that you're being, wasteful or that you're spending too much or that you're being like you've got the extra few bucks that you can buy a really good loaf of bread that you can enjoy." So, thinking about stuff, the vegan yogi's laughing at me. She says, "Yeah, we are not divas or entitled to like quality food. I do the same thing with food." I'm laughing right now. So relatable. Yeah, and then it was just that realization of because it's how we do something is how we tend to do multiple things. And so if we're settling in one area of our life, odds are we're settling in multiple areas of our life. And then realizing with great horror, oh my God, I've been doing this across the board. And, just these waves of realization start kind of crashing over you. But so thinking about that, open up your fridge. What in there? What do you really like? And it doesn't have to even be like a price difference. Like you might really be like, you know what? Love I love me some strawberry pop tarts. Like that's my thing. Those are a 9 or a 10. No judgment. Like that's you. Like okay, that's totally fine. If you're all about strawberry pop tarts, that's okay. This is where it's what I'm saying. It's such an individual thing. Or what are those things in your life that are a 1 or a 2 or a 4 or a 5? So for me, the cheap, spongy, fake wheat bread, it wasn't awful, but it wasn't enjoyable. It was something to put peanut butter on, basically. So it was maybe like a 5, you know? Um, or those button-down shirts were like a 1. Ugh, especially like the cotton ones that are stiff and starchy. Like this is ugh. Pantyhose is probably also would be like a 1 or a 2 for me. Um, yeah, office clothing in general is probably a 1 or a 2 for me. Vegan Yogi says, "I like my crystals, organic food, incense, bed sheets, and towels." Yeah, I like that. Totally. Yeah, towels, fluffy towels are such a treat. Um, gardening. I had a sunroom at one of my houses a few houses back that I really, really liked. And I've lived in really expensive homes and I've lived off the grid in the middle of nowhere with no running water and no electricity. Like I've had both ends of that spectrum. And so it's just kind of figuring out like what like that was a very big wake up call for me living in Las Vegas in this huge house and this whole life like none of it fit me and really just thinking like this is just not my place. And even when I was in New Mexico, when my whole life began falling apart, it was no, it was before then. It was before then. I realized I'm like, I don't like where I live. It's just not me. And began making a list of like, then what would be me? And realizing I really like mom and pop kind of stores. I like a place that I don't have to take a freeway everywhere I go. I don't like a big city. I like farmers markets. I like living near lakes. I like spending time on lakes. I like, what were some of the other things? I like a mix of, kind of chain stores and mom and pop places. I like places where parking is easy. I like uh, places with a lot of things to do outdoors. I like a place with all four seasons. Like I said, I like lakes. And so, kind of writing all of this stuff down. I like a place where I can go camping within, a few hours of where I live. I like a place that doesn't have a really harsh, that still has winter, but that's not like overly harsh. I like a place that doesn't have that has like a stable group of people that live there and that it's not like a total touristy town. So these kinds of things of thinking about what what do you like? Are you, maybe you are a big city person where you're like, man, I love it. Give me Brooklyn, New York City, and nightlife and all of that. That's totally cool. Like that's you. Like you got to do you. Vegan Yogi says, yeah, spending time near bodies of water and farmers markets and a sense of community. Yes. And I should add Indian food to that is my jam. I love Indian food so very much. Uh, like a good mix of food, like probably ethnic food. I like spices. So that kind of stuff. Fun things to do. If I want to go to a big city, I can go to a big city, but I don't want to like live in a big city. Truth Seeker says, Great Harvest Bread Shop is near me. Yeah, that place is delicious. Oh, good for you. Inner Fire says, yeah, I just wanted to throw it out there that I've noticed in my recovery so many opportunities where I'm practicing boundaries lately. Yes, totally. Okay, so that's the other flip side of it, right? So people, when they start waking up to this, they're like, okay, Dana, um, I'm losing my mind. I'm seeing red flags in everybody. And then that realization tends to be followed up with a little down the road of what's wrong with me? I keep attracting all these narcissists. And then it tends to be, oh my, like just like you're saying, oh my goodness, I'm seeing all of these areas that I can start practicing boundaries. But I'll tell you what tends to follow that awareness tends to be uh, I'm really tired. I feel like I'm having to kind of go to war every single day and set boundaries with so many people in so many different ways. And I'm tired. So if you do get to that place, or I'm confused or overwhelmed, or I struggle with feeling guilt with setting those boundaries, if you're at that place, just realize it does get easier. It's learning a brand new skill. And where you will be in 6 months from now or a year from now is going to be at a radically different place, and you will look back on this time in your life, probably not even that long, probably in seriously like probably a few weeks from now, like 6 weeks from now. You will look back and think, oh my gosh, you're just gonna see the world through this whole fresh set of eyes. Like, yeah, that's so obviously problematic. I totally see that now. Or you're gonna look back at these old situations and just be like, man, I cannot believe I did not see that for what it is. Like, that wouldn't even trip me up these days. So the old you, the situation from before might have really caused a lot of mental anguish and back and forth. And is it them or is it me? And how do I handle this? And oh my goodness, and how did I get here? And this whole mix of emotions. I feel guilty. I feel bad. I feel uncomfortable. I feel, upset. I feel angry. I feel violated. All of these things. Where the new you, even in like 6 weeks from now, is going to look back and be like, man, that would so be just a non-issue for me. Like it would never even get to that point these days. So what felt like this whole boulder to climb, this whole mountain to climb, this boulder for the old you is now going to be like this pebble in your shoe for the new you. And that's where things get really cool. So if you just keep moving forward, just realize it's all about growth, it's all about learning. Nobody does this stuff perfectly. Just keep moving forward. You keep adjusting, you keep adapting. It's all of these learning lessons that have lessons for you. And if you can kind of make that shift from these things are happening to you to a lot of these life lessons and stuff, it's happening for you. And that can feel very potentially re-victimizing depending on where a person is in their healing. And I by no stretch mean that to be hurtful at all. But as you're practicing, as these with this newfound awareness, you know, we didn't know before. We didn't know what we were doing or what we were getting involved in or what was going on. But with these new insights and practicing this and stumbling and falling and making mistakes and learning from it and realizing that life is giving you this stuff because it's all about growth. Life is about evolution on a macro level and on a micro level. And on that micro level, that individual level, it's personal growth, right? And it's about you moving forward and becoming the highest and greatest version of you. But the only way that growth ever happens is with resistance and with pain, unfortunately. So it's not easy. So I guess if you can kind of make that mindset shift to just try to embrace the process and replace a lot of that judgment that you might be feeling about how you're doing, the shame, the regret, the anger, and try to replace it with curiosity of like, what can I learn from this? How can I apply it? How can I do it differently next time? That's when the magic starts to happen. Because nobody does the stuff perfectly, right? Like we all kind of fall forward, but you just gotta keep going and keep moving in that direction. Standing Firm says, too late to find new friends, too late for a real relationship or marriage, too late for my education. I fight these beliefs. Here's the thing though, because you have grown and changed so much, had you the friends from you 20 years ago, the relationship, the marriage from you 20 years ago, the education that you would have gotten 20 years ago, it would not be what the you from today would have chosen. And, you know, kind of this saying like everybody tends to feel like, oh, they're too late. They're too late. 25-year-olds feel like this, you know, sort of like, no, I should already be. I think maybe it's even especially 25-year-olds, 25 to 30-year-olds. I talk about crunch time. I think that's some of the hardest times in a person's life because there's all of this expectation that we have of ourselves, that other people have of us, society has, that parents have, that our biological clocks have. And we tend to kind of make the best decisions we know how to at that age, but oftentimes we don't even know who we are, and so then we're restarting things over when we're 45 or when we're 55, and we're like, okay, I feel like I know who I am now, and now I'm 45 or 55. Very, 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 very common. And a lot of times we call this stuff like, oh, this person's having a midlife crisis. And really it's like, well, actually, no, they're not. They're finally just allowing themselves to live the life that they've always wanted to live, but felt guilty about living, you know? So, but it's not too late because really, if you think about it, okay, so what? I mean, so what? Like if you decided to radically switch careers or start making new friends or start, because it's basically updating is what you're doing, right? You're making all these decisions based off of all this prior programming that you had, but you can't run that same program forever. At some point, you got to update it. And so now you're updating it. And so then people think, but Dana, that means if I go back to college now, that I won't graduate till I'm 60 or until I'm 70 or until I'm 104. But the reality is, yeah, but you're going to be 60 or 70 or 104 anyhow. So, like, if that's going to happen anyhow, if you're going to be a certain age anyhow, then you might as well go do some of these things that you want to do and learn a new skill or make some new friends. And it just doesn't mean that you have to totally kind of, make a clean slate all at once. You can start going out and making some new friends or start dating or start taking some classes or start exploring interests in a certain topic in whatever way that you're comfortable with. Yeah, Maria says, yes, I view midlife crises so differently. It really is people waking up and saying, I don't want to be miserable anymore and becoming authentic. Yeah, I think that's what a lot of it is. I mean, so many people, they make these really major life decisions when they're fairly young. And it's these decisions that are based off of shoulds. And the next thing they know, they've made decisions based on what they felt was reasonable or responsible, or maybe even by default. Like they accidentally got pregnant, or they accidentally, they were in college because they felt like they should be, or they didn't think that they had any other option. And so they went down this one career field, or they just didn't even think about it. And the next thing they know, they've been working at the same restaurant they've been working at since they were 16, and now they're the manager of it, you know? So, and then the more responsibility starts getting heaped on. Now they have kids and a mortgage and bills and these college loans or what have you. They feel the more trapped they feel like they are. And then they just realize, like, I don't know this life and I don't like this life. And I don't even think I wanted this life. Like, how do I get out of here? People become really profoundly unhappy. That's probably more common than any other scenario. So people start trying to turn that ship around, you know? Yeah, True Seeker says, yeah, it's okay to make mistakes. We're updating. Exactly. And we're always going to be updating. That's the that's the scary thing, but the exciting thing is if you're truly living life, it's going to be a life of trial and error and lots of lessons learned, many of which come the hard way, many of which we talked about that whole tuition at the school of hard knocks. Like you're gonna waste money. You're gonna put it in the wrong thing. You're gonna like these things, they just happen. It's all part of it. Sort of like the saying goes, like good judgment comes from experience, but experience often comes from bad judgment. So, it's just it's this crazy thing called life, we're just all trying to figure it out, and it's okay, totally okay. Sure, Bana says, Dana, can I give you a suggestion for topics we can discuss weekly or videos to make? I was thinking that we could talk about boundaries and dedicate a couple of live streams to them if you could. I think that's a fantastic idea. I like that. We can do that. Let me think. Maybe after the live stream's over, comment down if people want to comment down below about how we could do that. Kind of what would you like to see with that? Like the first live stream of every month dedicated to that, or do you want to just hop on every Wednesday every now and again and that's what we'll talk about, or how are you thinking that would play out? I'm open to trying different things. So very cool. Yeah. Vegan Yogi says, yes, I'd love to learn healthy boundaries and steps to take. Yeah. I think that would be fantastic we can talk about that and see. Okay, what time is it? It is almost 11:30. So we are almost ready to call it a night, but let's do what we've been doing. So let's take some time to just relax and be in the moment and get grounded before we call it a night, and then feel good. Let's see. Maria, real quick, asked Dana, don't you think Henry Cloud is an excellent teacher? I love the book, The Necessary Endings. It's excellent. So, and real quick, book club next Thursday, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I don't know how long it's going to run, a few hours, but you can get my notes on that book on my website, thriveafterabuse.com. Go to the book club section, go to notes, and you can read my top 11 takeaways from that book. There were so many. And my notes are long, but it's a really, really great book. Highly recommend it. So, okay, guys, let's take a moment. Oh, gosh, to stretch and just let some of this tension go. Be in the moment. So take a deep breath in through your nose and exhaling slowly out through your mouth. Just letting the tension melt off of your body. Take another deep breath in through your nose. And out through your mouth. Paying special attention to any areas that are kind of calling to you, that are storing tension. Any areas that feel tight or stiff or pinched. And as you breathe in through your nose, send that breath to those areas. And feel that breath kind of swirling around those areas and soaking up the tension. And as you exhale, exhale the tension and the pain from those areas. So let's try that. So breathe in through your nose, sending breath to the areas that need it. Letting that oxygen swirl around all of that tension or pain or pinchedness. And as you exhale slowly through your mouth, exhale as loudly as you can and imagine yourself exhaling that tension. blowing that tension and that stress as far away from your body as you possibly can. So let's try that again. Breathe in slowly through your nose, sending that breath to those areas that need it. Letting that breath soak up any and all tension or stress or pain. And then exhaling loudly, blowing away all of that tension, stress, or pain. Let's do that for 3 more breaths. Okay. Now imagine the stress melting from your face as you just relax. Relax your forehead and your eyes and your mouth and your jaw. Just letting the stress and the tension go from your face. Let your jaw even hang open, just relaxing it completely. And letting your tongue fall from the roof of your mouth. Feeling what it feels like to have your face be relaxed. And if you're finding yourself thinking about certain things, or if you're finding your body holding on to that tension and your eyes are becoming pinched or your lips are becoming pursed, tell yourself that just for now, you're going to take that tension and that stress and all those worries, and you're just going to set it aside. Sorry, my cat is going crazy. Kitty cat. No, no. No, no. What are you doing? So set all of that anxiety. Cat. Oh my gosh. Setting all of that anxiety aside and realizing you can pick it back up at any time, and it can wait. It'll still be there in 5 or 10 minutes from now. For now, the only thing that you have to do is just be in your body and relax. Move on down to your throat and the back of your neck and your shoulders, and let them come down. Feel the tension as it releases. in them. And let your chest just open up. Let your shoulders fall open. As you, sorry, as you relax and let the tension and the stress just go. And work your way down your arms, your shoulders, to your elbows, to your forearms. Just letting your arms fall in whatever position is most comfortable. And breathe. In through your nose, sending that breath to any areas that need it, and exhaling all of the tension, tightness, and pain. Sending it far away from you. Oh my God. Cat. No, no, no. And relaxing your stomach. Relaxing your hips. And just letting your body just kind of fall open or take a position that's comfortable. Feeling that tension as it just comes off your body, almost like steam. Just effortlessly and easily coming off of your body. Relaxing your thighs, your knees, and your calves. Sending those healing breaths to any areas that need them. Remembering to continue to release any tension that might be returning to your face. Relax your eyes, your forehead, your cheeks, your mouth, your jaw. Letting the tongue fall from the roof of your mouth. Letting your jaw fall open. And doing a mental scan of your body and seeing, are there any areas that you're still holding tension or pain, and sending some healing breaths to those areas now. Now imagine a light, silver and white, healing light. It's everything good. It's joy, it's happiness, contentment, healing, clarity, positivity. And that as that light enters your body, imagine it having fun, that it just wants to dance inside of you as it swirls around every cell in your body, just healing every single cell that it touches, and yet being playful at the same time. Feel it as it just whooshes around in your body, like it's happy to be home. It's happy to be home inside of you. And it's dancing and splashing and swirling. And you can feel it. You can feel that it's playful and it's energetic and it's fun and it's healing. And it's just the most amazing thing ever. And feel that light as it travels in and around the inside of your head and your face and your neck and in your chest, down your arms, into your hands, into your fingers, making them feel all tingly, down into your chest, your stomach, your hips, and then just running down into your legs, swirling around into your feet, into your toes, and out through the ground. And imagine that light extending past you about 12 to 18 inches. And it's moving its way through your feet. It's grounding you. And it feels very much like if you were a plant, these would be your roots. And it's a cool feeling as this energy, little tendrils of energy kind of unfold like a fern. And you realize that this energy extends so far beyond you and that it's part of you and yet it's a part of everything. And you're feeling so grounded and connected right now. And feel your hands as they continue to tingle. Feel the tingling in your feet. Realize that you feel this tingling actually in every single part of your body. It's like a pulsing, energetic feeling. Now that this light and this energy is so much a part of you, think about other people that might need some of this healing. And imagine sending them some of this healing, energetic peace and this light. And as you send it to them, imagine this energy kind of wrapping around them and giving them a big hug. Maybe you're sending some of this energy out to other people here in the live stream tonight that you feel could really use some of this energy. Or maybe it's a person that you saw on the street today, or somebody that you know in your personal life. Or maybe it's even somebody that you haven't thought about in a long, long time. And if you have any people in your life that are near and dear to you, including animals, you can send them this energetic hug and thank them for their time in your life. And when you're done doing that, come on back to yourself and give yourself a big, energetic, healing hug. And let yourself know that you're doing a good job and that you're here to grow and that you're here to learn and that you're doing a really good job. That energy is always around you and it's always inside of you. And any time that you need to call on it, or that you're scared, or that you're fearful, you can, and it's there. And when you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes and come on back. Okay, so welcome back. And with that said, I hope you guys feel grounded comfortable, centered, content, peaceful, relaxed, appreciated, understood, all of those good type of emotions. And with that said, I will see you guys next week. So thank you so much for joining me. So have a fantastic week. And as always, lots of love to you guys. You are not alone. You are not crazy. And you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care and have a fantastic week. Good night.